in Ferndale.
And Mayor Piana.
Next is we have a motion. Oh, we do have one addition. Charlie, our Commissioner, Charlie Cavell is joining us, and if we can add him at the beginning of the presentations.
Mayor, I would move that we accept the agenda with the addition of Charlie Cavell to our presentation list.
Support.
Moved by Paul, support Councilman James.
Councilmember Polika?
Yes.
Councilmember James?
Yes.
Mayor Pretend Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana.
Yes. Next is the electronic meeting procedures. I can't believe we are in month 10 of meeting via Zoom meetings, and the electronic meeting procedures have been updated multiple times by our legislature, and we're again right at the lame duck, and we are now allowed to do open meetings on Zoom until March 31st. But the addition now is that council members have to say where they're located when they do roll call. Once the legislature updates it again, we'll see where we're at the end of probably March and see what will be allowed moving forward. But until then, public comment will be managed by our assistant city manager, and how we go through that will be discussed once we get to call the audience. All right, first up on presentations is County Commissioner Charlie Cavell. Good evening, Charlie. It's great to see you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for letting me slide in here. And again, Marnie, Council Mayor, my apologies for not reaching out on Thursday like I should and calling y'all today. But thanks for being flexible.
Okay. That's okay.
So if I could give a quick update about COVID and some resources. So first, I want to say that our supply of vaccine is growing. So the last, here comes my cat. What was that you were saying, Mayor, about the online meeting protocol? Sorry to break it. Second thing is that,
We've all had cat sightings of our own here. So.
Right. How Ferndale, right? Oh, coming to you live from Ferndale if I have to record that for you, Marnie. But so first, vaccine supply is growing. So for the first 4 weeks of vaccine distribution that OakGov was in charge of, we got about 2,000 doses a week. And last week we got 7,200 doses, and this week we just got a shipment of 6,825 doses. That means, for context, the over 200,000 individuals that fit into phase 1A and 1B in Oakland County alone, which mind you means that we need 400,000 doses. We were at last week, as of last week, we're at 1.5% of saturation in terms of giving vaccinations to the 1.5% of the phase 1A and phase 1B people. We are now to 34 that went out on Saturday in people's arms. We're now at 3% complete with phase 1A and phase 1B. So if you're 65 and up and you're one of the 97% of people that haven't got a vaccination yet, what we are suggesting you do is please reach out to your private health systems like Beaumont or St. Joe or Ascension, because they also are handing out and distributing vaccine. And then the third thing I'll just say is if you have any questions about this at all, please feel free to call me at 248-07-4347, or ideally first call the nurse on call at 800-848-5533, or text OakGov to 28748. Those are the big updates. And also I'll tell you all that tomorrow is Health and Safety Committee meeting where we'll be talking to the sheriff and the county health director. So if anyone has any questions, please reach out. And then Wednesday is Finance Committee where we'll be talking about spending your tax dollars. So please reach out if you have any questions about that.
Thank you. I did have one question. There is information about getting your vaccination at Meyer. My mother-in-law scheduled her vaccination at Meyer and have both of them scheduled. So I don't know if that's an option for people in Oakland County. She does not live in Oakland County, but does live in Wayne County. So if that's something that you can investigate and provide more information on, it would be very helpful since we have one right at the corner of 8 Mile.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next time we expect some comments from your cat.
If I may, also through the chair, we've had some requests at my place of employment as to whether or not for individuals who cannot get out to get the COVID vaccine, just like the flu vaccine, are there any talks regarding nurses maybe providing that for individuals who cannot get out in their home?
I appreciate you asking it right before we start tomorrow. So I'm going to write that down. There have been a lot of questions, and maybe this will fit Councilmember Leaks May. There are 80 long-term care facilities that OakGov, the county government, has purview over, making sure that the residents and the staff there get vaccinated. And then there are several others that are privately funded that have a deal with CVS and Walgreens. But you're asking specifically about people that are homebound, that like live at home, not in a long-term care facility. Okay, cool. I'll ask and get back to you. And same to you, Mayor Piana, about Meyer.
Okay. Thank you very much for being here and keeping us updated.
Appreciate you.
Excellent. And now we're moving on to 5B, which is welcome the City of Ferndale's next Fire Chief, Teresa Robinson. And I'm going to hand that over to our City Manager, Joe.
Thank you, Mayor. This item, Chief Teresa Robinson will be the appointed Fire Chief for Ferndale. As you know, Chief Pesha retired, indicated he was going to retire in the early fall. So since then, we went through a competitive recruitment process. We had a wonderful response with many qualified candidates, and we are fortunate enough to bring in someone with Teresa's experience, perspective, and knowledge. I can't wait to see all of those things come to fruition to benefit this community and our organization. And before I move the mic over to Chief to let her introduce herself, I want to just acknowledge and credit all of the efforts and work the Ferndale Fire Department has done, being short-staffed and without a chief over the past couple months. Really, in the credit to Interim Chief Dennis Barr / Fire Marshal for stepping up into that role all of these months. I really do sincerely appreciate your commitment, integrity, and effort. It's just always stuns me. So with that, welcome, Chief.
Good evening, everybody. I'm happy to be here, and I'm very excited about this opportunity to be stepping in as your new fire chief. For anybody who hasn't had an opportunity to see my background, I am coming from Lansing Fire Department. I have over 24 years on the job with Lansing Fire Department. I've held a variety of roles. The one I retired out of was assistant fire chief. So coming from a large fire department to a smaller fire department, I know some people were maybe a little concerned, but I'm extremely excited because one of the things I love about Ferndale, beyond the amazing community, is the fact that I get to be more hands-on and be a more integrated part of the community and less removed in the administrative role. So I'm very excited to come down and work with the amazing men and women that are there and the community and their Pleasant Ridge, Royal Oak Township, and build those relationships and those connections. So thank you for having me. I won't take up too much of your time. I'm excited, and I will be there soon because I actually will be closing on my house beginning of February and moving into the city of Ferndale. So
Thank you. We really appreciate that commitment, and I'm really excited to see you in person and out in the community. We're so glad you're here and welcome.
thank you.
Chief. We'll see you next week.
Yes.
All right. Next is on to presentation 5C, which is the resolution in support of the Pan-African flag raising for Black History Month. And who is introducing this?
Through the chair, I'll provide a brief introduction.
Okay.
City Council in June passed an anti-racist resolution. That resolution prompted actions by city staff and questions by Councilwoman Leaks May. She consulted with us and discussed how we might move forward with amending and establishing a resolution process that would enable us to temporarily raise flags in honor of Black History Month as well as Juneteenth. And so at the previous council meeting, City Council adopted that resolution, and I'm proud to put forth the recommendation that was actually drafted by our graduate management assistant, Tanisha Woods McSwain, who's done an incredible job leading this initiative. So with that, I will cede the mic over to Councilwoman Leaks May to read the resolution.
All right. So, let's see, how am I going to read this? Excuse me. The City of Ferndale is a community that values its diversity as demonstrated by those who live, work, and gather in our city. We, the City Council, support the rights, freedoms, and equality of individuals within the African American community. We believe that Black Lives Matter, and we offer our solidarity and support to our Black residents, employees, students, and visitors in Ferndale and beyond, because we acknowledge the trauma, anxiety, and exhaustion that many have been feeling. We recognize February as the month when the United States celebrates the historical achievements of African American men and women that have contributed to the betterment of our country. Our city takes pride in its embracement of diversity and believe that each person has the right to live life without prejudice and unfair discrimination based on age, gender identity, race, color, religion, marital status, origin, orientation, or physical challenges. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council recognizes and celebrates February 2021 as Black History Month in the City of Ferndale, and we pledge to encourage the celebration of Black History Month to provide a continuing opportunity for all people to learn about the discrimination and inequality that has faced and continues to face the African American community. Be it further resolved, City Council directs the raising of the Pan-African flag during the month of February as part of the city's celebration of Black History Month and a symbol of its commitment to be a welcoming environment to all individuals within the Black community and their families. And that a copy of this resolution will be sent to neighboring cities that border the great city of Ferndale, to the executive of Oakland County, and the governor of the state of Michigan, our U.S. representatives to the House of Representatives, and our senators. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Denise and Ms. McSwain for drafting this resolution. And I also want to thank acknowledge the support of our attorney, city manager, our mayor of council, for Councilwoman Bruner James for working with us on the flag drafting of the policies, and to Riley Coleman, who the communications assistant, who will be putting out acknowledgement and word regarding our drafting of this resolution that will be forthcoming. And I just really want to thank you all support. I think this is a huge step for the city of Ferndale, and it's testament to the fact that we did that anti-racism declaration. And it's not just a piece of paper, it's something that the city is moving forward with and taking it very seriously. And I'm really proud of my colleagues and council and staff for that, those steps and those measures. Thank you.
And I want to thank you for leading this effort on behalf of the community. So thank you. And I'm very honored to support this. And I know everybody on council, I think, is too. And look forward to seeing it rise, the flag rise on February 1st in front of our city hall. All right, next up of the presentation is 5C, which is the Social Districts Update presentation from the Ferndale DDA. And welcome to the Zoom screen is DDA Director Lena Stevens.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Give me one moment. Into presentation mode. Okay. Can you confirm that you're seeing the presentation? Great. I see a thumbs up, so I'm going to take that as my go sign. So good evening, Mayor and Council. I am Lena Stevens, the DDA Executive Director. I'm here tonight with an item that's for discussion. There's no decision to be made this evening regarding this item. It represents the culmination of some research and some recommendations from staff. But the idea tonight is to let you hear about this idea, perhaps pose some questions to me if you feel like there's time, or set up time to talk to me individually. So if you might remember, we tabled this discussion in September, primarily due to weather, but also staff constraints. We have a lot of plates spinning in the air, as the metaphor that I've been going with recently. And so we chose to kind of put this one down and pick it back up when we had some time. So I want to thank Lindsay Gunzarek, who's helped us come up with a name that's not social districts, because I didn't feel like for branding that was going to stick in people's minds. So we're calling this the Ferndale Patio Zone, and that stands for pay and take it outside. So if you, just to refresh you a little bit, the state of Michigan has passed a law that allows us to set up something called social districts. And within those social districts, there are something called commons areas, in which restaurants or any business with a liquor license can actually sell a drink in a 16-ounce or less cup for people to take outside and enjoy outside. Obviously, this allows for more social distancing, and perhaps keeping people a little bit safer and maybe a little more attractive to come to downtown if they don't have to be inside. Again, as I talked about, we would brand this as the patio zones, and the DDA would be responsible for developing and implementing a management plan in collaboration with city staff. I've been working very closely with Michael Larry. Now, as we have this discussion, we will move into maybe more detailed discussions with the police department, working through what that's going to look like on our side. Just as a highlight, only drinks served in official patio zone cups will be able to be taken outside. And at the moment, what I'm bringing forward to you is a proposal where we would pilot this from April 1st to June 30th. That would give us enough time to test the idea, to work out any kinks, and then to also say, we need to have a check-in and say, maybe this isn't right for us, or maybe we need to change something, but in enough of a time that going through the process of getting authorized is worth it for a participating business. So trying to kind of walk that line to try something new in a very, very difficult time for businesses, to just give something a shot and see if it could work for us and be the right fit. Right now, what we've discussed are 2 social districts / commons areas. They are one and the same. If you'll recall, in September, we brought you a proposal that had several different social districts and different commons areas. Well, when Michael Larry was doing some research this fall and calling other communities, he actually found out that cities that were doing this successfully kind of had bigger areas. And that made a lot of sense to me, because the smaller areas, my fear was too much congregating, making a very, very specific place to congregate. By opening it up, while yes, it does give us a broader, bigger area to sort of police and control, it also might minimize that congregation. And that was also, when we took this to the DDA board in August, that was their concern as well, that these were going to become kind of like party areas if it was just a very designated, here's 3 parking spaces, or here's 2 parking spaces over here, that it would kind of encourage people to get together. So we're going to use Woodward as a natural barrier and call this Ferndale Patio Zone West and Patio Zone East. Couple of FAQs, I'm not going to go through every single one, but basically you have to keep your cup in the zone where you bought it. So if you bought it in Patio Zone West, you got to drink it in Patio Zone West. You can't take it across Woodward to the other side. It's got to be in an official cup. You can take that cup back into the restaurant where you bought it. You cannot take it into another restaurant. You could take it into a retailer if that retailer decides that they're okay with that. At least that's our current interpretation, and these things are up for discussion. This is where the proposal is today. And these drinks could be beer, wine, or liquor. So they could be cocktails, I guess, is where I'm going with that. Why are we allowed to do this? As I mentioned, Public Act 124 of 2020. I'm not going to go into the full details of this, but I know that several of you might want to. So there's a link on this presentation, which I will share with you after today's meeting. It's not a very detailed law, so I do encourage you to go read it. It outlines a few responsibilities for what we have to do, which is basically to put out signage and to make sure the cup have our logo and the logo of the place where you bought the drink. Other than that, it's not a ton of guidance from that. So I would take a look at it. Who else is doing this? So in the fall, we directly contacted the cities on the left: Battle Creek, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, Adrian, Belleville, and Grosse Pointe Park. At that time, those folks had operating social districts and had not at that point reported any issues with it. Obviously, the weather got cooler after we made those calls, so I wouldn't expect that necessarily they've had a ton more experience with these at this point. But we also checked in to see who in Oakland County might be doing this. On the right is Lake Orion, Clarkston, Farmington, who is established. They've gone to the MLCC. They've got their authority to do this. Pontiac has approved it with the local government and is waiting for MLCC. This may not be an inclusive list. These are folks who have told Main Street Oakland County that they're doing it. There might be other folks in Oakland County doing this, but this represents what we know today. Proposed hours. So as I mentioned before, I am proposing an April 1st to June 30th timeline, along with hours from 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. The idea would be to catch the brunch crowd, to catch the early dinner crowd, maybe the late dinner crowd, and then cut it off maybe before we get to the lively evening crowd, let's put it that way. And obviously this would also be in accordance with any regulations from any epidemic orders. So, you know, if the MDHHS says we need to close it down, we will. So this would be in accordance with that. So what's next? We'll discuss this today as much as you feel like doing. We can set up individual times to talk about this and go through any of your questions. Once I have that feedback, I'm going to take about the next week to finish the management plan, do outreach to a few businesses to see if I can say who might be interested in sort of immediately participating. And we're also going to create a city process. So we're going to have a city permit where you're going to apply to us first. It should be pretty fast. We don't necessarily think there needs to be a fee associated immediately, but we'll explore how much staff time it's taking so we can decide later if that needs to become a fee-based service. It would come back to the council for actual approval on your first meeting in February, and then also go to the DDA board that same week. Providing that both bodies approve it, we would move to the applying to the MLCC at the government level, which can take 2 to 3 weeks from what we're hearing to get that. After that, businesses actually have to apply to participate as well, and we will go through the process of holding their hand and making sure that that's an easy, seamless process that they understand. We'll also have to order supplies, cups, stickers, post signage, and work on branding and outreach, and all that stuff. So we'll be doing that after this body approves it. Overall, I think this is something we should try. I recognize that it's new. I recognize that it's different. And I also recognize that maybe we decide later that it's not the right fit. But businesses are struggling. I believe that social distancing is going to be important for at least another year. I think people are not going to be used to being together, even if I could snap my fingers and make it safe tomorrow. We've all gotten used to being pretty distant from each other. So I think offering this is a great way to deal with that and still be able to go out and support our businesses. So that is the end of my presentation, and I will turn it perhaps over to the mayor or anybody that has questions for me, and I'll share this presentation with you at the end of the meeting.
Thank you, Lena. Are there any questions from council at this point about the patio district, patio zones?
I had a few questions. On the topic of the cups and stickers and how all of that's managed. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming that a person that wanted to partake of this would buy the cup at one of the participating restaurants, right?
Correct.
Okay. Do we have a rough estimate as to what that price tag might be?
We don't, but we have talked about, I think they cost approximately we're in like the 5 to 10 cents a cup is what we're talking about. And we've talked about whether or not we could pass that charge on, or DDA could maybe do the first round of cups for free and then have the businesses buy them from us. So we haven't gotten that exact detailed number yet, but that's where we are.
Can people reuse the cups? So
They cannot reuse the cups.
okay. So if they leave the district, do they have to turn the cup in somewhere?
They just have to throw it away. So you don't have to go turn it in officially, but if you had a patio zone, you know, West cup or from, it wouldn't say West, but let's say you got it from Bobcat Bonnie's and you're over on the other side of Woodward, that wouldn't be allowed. So you'd need to throw it away while you're over there before you cross over Woodward to the other side.
Okay.
If I may, through the chair.
Sure.
So my question is, how is this even, are the businesses going to kind of enforce this? I mean, how is that going to be handled as far as compliance?
That's a great question. I think what we're going to be looking at is sort of a joint effort. Certainly going to need the help of the businesses in explaining the rules, probably posting what the rules are, you know, maybe at the bar or maybe in their window or both. Obviously, we are also going to need to do some local enforcement of that. And that will be the next discussion. Should this body decide this is something to pursue, we'll work more specifically on what that means and what that will entail. But I have a shared responsibility.
Have you seen enforcement burden on any of the other cities that are participating in this?
Not that they had reported by this fall. So when we talked to them in the fall, everybody said things were running pretty smoothly. When, you know, after we talked to them, the weather got colder. So I don't think anybody's really had like peak warm weather experience with this. So at the time we did the research, no, that's not to say there couldn't be in the future.
These are good questions, and I appreciate the, you know, trying out the pilot so that we can work out any kinks that arise through this whole new process, which is new to every city because of the pandemic and the legislation that got passed this in summer of 2020. Yep.
Through the chair.
Sure.
So is there a concern about underage drinking that could be happening out on the sidewalks? Someone going in, purchasing a beer, coming out, giving it to a kid in a different cup, you know, someone younger. Is there concern for that?
Certainly, I think that's something that's a possibility. It's not as though we would have, you know, we couldn't have like a police officer stationed at every single
Obviously,
business.
yes.
So, yeah. So, I mean, it's definitely a concern in that. I think that goes back to the question of sort of enforcement needing to be a two-way street. It also goes back to why we would have a city permit before they go to the MLCC, so that if we continually see a problem like that, we could say to a business, we're sorry, you can no longer participate in the Ferndale patio zone because we've had too many complaints or we've had too many violations. So I think that was an idea from Michael Lair, and I think it's fantastic to give us a little bit more local control and ability to monitor things.
So each business is going to have a different cup. I mean, they're going to be the same color, but it's going to have different information, or
sort of. So the cup will have the Ferndale Patio Zone logo. It has to be marked with our insignia or logo or mark or whatever it is. But then if you bought it from a particular business, they've got to put some kind of sticker on there that's in permanent ink. So it will say where you bought it. It would say, I bought this at Rosie's, or I bought this at Jay's Penalty Box. It'll have a sticker on it that the cup will look the same.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Through the chair, may I ask a few questions? One, I'm curious whether any communities have tried wristbands or any other mechanism that would help curb concerns about, passing a drink off to an underage person or something like that. And I'll just shotgun approach all my questions here. In thinking through, essentially disposable cups, I'm curious just about sustainability and increased trash, whether there would be an anticipated need for increased trash collection downtown, and or if sustainable biodegradable cups would be a possibility. And then third, I wondered if you would just talk a little bit about the pilot period. Would the policy that you would pitch to us have a hard stop at the end of June, or I can't remember if it was the beginning or end of June, but at any rate, whatever date it is, basically, would we have enough lead time to make tweaks before deciding to either extend with changes or make the evaluation toward the end of the period?
Those are fantastic questions. Okay, so wristbands, I hate to go back to this well, but I do it all the time. So Decatur, Georgia, where I came from, I actually follow them on social, and that's how they were doing it. I don't know if that's why it's required in Georgia or not, but it was special cup plus a wristband. So it's definitely something we could look into. It'd be, those are pretty bright, pretty neon, easy to see from a distance. That is definitely something we could consider. You do have to think about it's one extra step for the business, but we could weigh that against, the kind of public health, public safety concerns. The disposable issue, we can definitely research biodegradable, and I believe some of that research has started, and we'll definitely look into, what that would mean for increased trash collection, because you're absolutely right that it would increase that. DPW already knows that litter in a typical year, litter control kind of decreases during the winter and then starts to increase again downtown in spring. They've had to change that a little bit with some of the mask and glove litter, and actually get down there for litter cleanup more than they usually would in winter time. But they're already sort of prepared for that, but this would definitely probably ramp it up a notch. As for the pilot period, yes, we would build in plenty of time for us to be getting feedback from the participants, from staff, and come back to you with a decision point. When we go to the MLCC for our permit, we probably would have wide open hours and not include the timeline, and then restrict the hours and restrict the timeline based on your resolution or based on your guidance, because that way we wouldn't have to go back to the state and continually ask for edits to our license. We would probably say we want all the hours and all of the months, and then restrict it locally. Certainly give you plenty of time, plenty of feedback. All right, no other questions? A lot of mine answered. So Lena, really good presentation. And we'll try this out, I think. Need other opportunities to help this pandemic. Thank you for being here. All right, everybody, we're moving on the agenda. And next up is call to audience. And we limit this to a half hour. And if there's any more speakers after a half hour, we host that immediately after the call to council at the end of the meeting. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes. You can talk about anything on or off the agenda. And our assistant city manager, Kyle, will be leading the queue of people who have raised their hand on Zoom with the blue raise hand. And if you're calling in, he will be reaching out to see if you are ready to make comments. So Kyle, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. First up, we have somebody named Dave. Go ahead, Dave.
Hello.
Welcome, Dave.
Welcome.
Go ahead.
Hello, council members. Couple comments about the Airbnb ordinance. I don't understand how we went from 2 people who fit in a 120 square foot bedroom to 4 people per bedroom in determining how many people can stay in a residence. I don't see many Ferndale bedrooms holding 2 beds with 4 people. That sounds like a motel or a hotel room. Darn, you can't see me. If you have a 3-bedroom house with big bedrooms, you can have as many as 13 guests. That doesn't seem very fair to the neighbors. But as I said in the email I sent to you, my main issue with this is that without an ultimate limit on how many guests can stay on a property, you're encouraging small mini hotels in our R3 residential areas surrounding the downtown. It's bad enough that right now, someone can build a 45-foot tall, 5-unit apartment building in the 50-foot wide lot next to me. Under this ordinance, it would appear that that 5-unit apartment building could be turned into a mini hotel, and if the bedrooms are 120 square feet, as many as 25 transient guests or more could be staying in the middle of our quiet residential area. I urge you to table this ordinance, rework it so that it deals with the ultimate number of people that can stay on a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Staff will be presenting on this topic when it's on the agenda, and we'll go over the requirements of the ordinance in more detail. All right, who's up next?
Thank you. Next, we have Antonio David Garcia. I think Dave Garcia. Go ahead.
Hi, Dave. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Good to hear your voice.
It's good to see you all. Thank you very much for the work that you continue to do for our city. I just wanted to speak briefly in support of the Full Circle construction project. You know, most of you know that I've been back from Los Angeles about 1.5 years now as executive over at Affirmations. And when I was in LA, we had a 100-unit apartment, affordable housing apartments for seniors, LGBT seniors. And when I left Los Angeles, we had just cut the ribbon on another 100 affordable housing units for seniors. And each of those had a 3-year wait list, by the way. Even the one had a 3-year wait list before we even had our first resident. I know how important it is for affordable, you all do, we all do, know how important it is for affordable housing, and especially for our LGBT seniors. Now, I know that we can't discriminate, nor would we want to discriminate for affordable housing. But there are ways in which we can make sure that our LGBT seniors are aware of these units when and if they become available. But I really just wanted to talk to you all as my colleagues and friends that it's needed. This is needed. And I know that this is just a first step. I mean, you know, some of us at Affirmations have been sitting on a community council for years to try to figure out how to build more affordable housing for seniors. And this would just be one, hopefully, of a handful of projects in Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and maybe Washtenaw counties for our community. But the need is there, and we don't have any. Los Angeles is doing a better job, Chicago, New York, and some other areas for our LGBTQ seniors. But we can do that too. I have faith we can do that too. I know we can. And, you know, Full Circle seems to be honest and reputable player. We know that they're working with the Ruth Ellis Center right now in Detroit. I have a lot of respect for those guys down there, and they've had good things to say about Full Circle as well. So I just wanted to take a little bit of time, one, to thank you all for the work that you continue to do for us. Two, to tell you Affirmations is doing very well financially right now, and that's great for our city. And then three, to show my support for this possible project. Now, obviously, we know tax credits are going to be a big part of that. But if everything goes well, I think it would be a crown for all of us in our city.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Mayor, we have Roland Stringfellow.
Hi, Roland. Welcome.
Good evening, Council. My name is Roland Stringfellow. I'm the senior pastor of the Metropolitan Community Church of Detroit, and we have made Ferndale our home for over 20 years. Until recently, the Drayton Avenue Presbyterian Church sold their property. Many of you know that. And we are currently in Clawson, but looking to come back to the fabulous Ferndale area and to the core where many of our members are. The reason why I would like to speak in favor of the Full Circle development project is I wanted to also give you an introduction to the gentleman who the project is named after. Ray Shepard is no longer with us. He passed away in 2018, but he was also a resident of Ferndale, openly gay man. Many individuals within our congregation would help him with his needs. He was a frequent visitor to affirmations. He also benefited from Sage Detroit's services. And this particular project is going to be much more than just providing affordable housing. We are excited to offer programming and community connections to the residents in this project. So along with our community partners such as Affirmation and Sage Detroit, we're looking forward to offering assistance with social connections, mental health support, and a spiritual livelihood to maintain holistic health. And so this is going to be so much more than just housing. It really will be a community center. And I just want to, again, give my verbal support for this project. And I am one of the individuals who helped bring Full Circle to this particular project. We've been working with them for the last 3 to 4 years, trying to find the right space in Ferndale, and we believe we have found it. And so again, we're just so very excited to see something like this to give to community members as well as to the whole community of Ferndale as a whole. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Roland.
Next up, Mayor, we have Kelly Chow. Go ahead, Kelly.
All right, I think I unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome.
All right, perfect. So actually, I was listening to one of the first items on the agenda about the coronavirus 2019 vaccine tonight. And the thought occurred to me, I'm currently a nursing student. Have we considered looking or trying to find some sort of maybe nursing school who could help potentially seniors or anyone who is in home and stuck because of the pandemic? I'm going to guess that our instructors and our school probably won't let us give the vaccine, but is there a way perhaps to work with medical or healthcare professionals up and coming to maybe help relieve some of the burden on those who are stuck at home?
Kelly, this is an interesting idea. We've heard it, and we will discuss internally and reach out to County Commissioner Cavell about this idea as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Next, Mayor, we have Michelle. Go ahead.
Hi, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I had to press the unmute. Thank you for having me tonight, and I'd like to speak on the Full Circle project on East 9 Mile. And this is a very important project, especially for seniors like myself that would need maybe in the future affordable housing and a place for my community, the LGBTQA+, to have a safe environment. There are many people in my community, seniors, that have to go back in the closet when they get an apartment, and this causes a lot of depression. And because of that depression, their health becomes a bigger issue. And I think this would be a great center. There'll be a lot to be offered. And I know that the building can't discriminate, so it would be a LGBTQ+ friendly environment when all the participants who are living there will be accepting. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Next, Mayor, we have Alan Hale.
Hi, Alan. Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thanks. I want to take a moment tonight to give a big shout out to Kyle Paulette, our Zoom facilitator. I was pleasantly surprised to see that we had live captions within Zoom this evening. I quickly emailed Kyle asking when we implemented that. And he informed me that it was at my recommendation. I had forwarded him a meeting earlier this month to the U.S. Access Board virtual meeting where they did a session on how to make virtual meetings accessible. And so I just wanted, as the chair of the Ferndale Accessibility and Inclusion Advisory Commission, I just wanted to thank you for being an ally and taking the time to make our city government more accessible to the deaf and hard of hearing residents of Ferndale. And then I added to that, I'm looking forward to continuing to work with the city to possibly get ASL interpreter services available on request if somebody who was deaf or hard of hearing wanted to participate in these live Zoom meetings.
Thank you, Alan. And thank you for always providing us information about how to do better with the tech.
Thanks, Alan. Next up, Mayor, we have, looks like a representative from Sage Metro Detroit.
Yes, hi. My name is Angie Perrone. I'm the Executive Director of Sage Metro Detroit, and we provide services and advocacy for LGBTQ older adults. We're based in Ferndale, but we serve Oakland, Wayne, Washtenaw, and Macomb counties. We strongly support Full Circle's proposal for the Raymond Shepherd House. There's a strong need for, I'm echoing what some of the other folks have said, but there really is a strong need for LGBTQ welcoming housing across the country. And Full Circle's proposal in Ferndale really does fill a critical gap in this region, especially for older adults. Now, unfortunately, LGBTQ older adults still face significant discrimination in housing. Decades of cumulative discrimination mean that many LGBTQ older adults live in poverty and struggle to find affordable housing and welcoming services. So nearly half of transgender older adults live at or below 200% of the federal poverty line. That's 1 out of 2. That's a significantly high number. This is even more pronounced for transgender older adults of color. The need for affordable and welcoming housing is much needed. So I have a couple of just brief stories to share, kind of to really underscore some of these points. So about a year ago, several of the LGBTQ orgs that serve LGBTQ older adults in the area, so Affirmation, Sage Metro Detroit, MCC Detroit, were approached to find affordable housing for an older transgender woman who had repeatedly experienced discrimination in her earlier housing situations and was struggling to find affordable housing. We really pulled together as a community to find her housing, but it was a significant feat, and it should not have been. Now, during COVID, we worked with a same-gender loving older man who was unlawfully evicted while he was hospitalized. It was incredibly challenging to find him housing during COVID. His experiences as a same-gender loving older Black man justifiably made him very nervous about new housing, particularly one that could welcome him without judgment. The proposed housing will help alleviate some of these challenges while serving a critical need for LGBTQ older adults in the community. And quite frankly, beyond the LGBTQ community too. Sage Metro Detroit strongly supports this project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jason McCaffrey.
Hi, Jason. Welcome.
Hi. I just wanted a point of clarity. Is there going to be time during the short-term rental presentation for public comment at that point? Because if so, I'll just reserve my comments till then.
Yes, I am opening that up for public comment because it was requested by residents. So.
Okay, cool.
Okay, thanks, Jason.
All good. Yep.
Next, Mayor, we have Jerry Peterson.
Good evening, Council. I'm Jerry Peterson, the Executive Director at the Alice Center. in speaking to the potential housing project with Full Circle Communities. I just want to say, as a very strong and valued partner of theirs for 5 years now, finally reaching the point of breaking ground on a 43-unit permanent supportive housing project in Detroit for LGBTQ young people experiencing homelessness. 2 quick comments that I will make. The first is that when a community is considering a new development, one of the concerns is when a group comes in from out of town, who are they? How will they be? What are their concerns for the community? This is a nonprofit developer who has incredible integrity and absolute commitment, not only to the project, but to the neighborhoods and the residents surrounding that project, the impacts. I've never seen a group who is so attentive and thoughtful about all the dynamics of people involved in impacts of a project. The other thing is that we have experienced some significant challenges in building a project that focuses, that both meets fair housing law and focuses on providing housing opportunities for LGBTQ young people experiencing homelessness. Carl and Full Circle has been a great partner working through those challenges, and we are really confident that we're going to have a really diverse and welcoming environment that's going to be an incredible step forward for improving housing for LGBTQ youth experiencing homelessness. And so I think this is an incredible project.
Thank you very much, Jerry, for your comments.
Next, Mayor, we have a call-in, so I will unmute them. This is last 4 digits 9343 by phone. If there's anything you'd like to say for a public comment, go ahead. And I hear no comments, Mayor, from that line.
Okay. It looks like we have concluded the queue of folks who are interested in doing public comments. So we are going to close call the audience and move on to the first public hearing. We have 2 tonight. And the order of operations for a public hearing is as follows for each, is that there's going to be a staff presentation first, and then I will open it up. The second step will be opening up to public hearing, and that will be for public comment on the item, and then I will close the public comment period, and we will move to council questions, and then council will need to make a motion in order to go into debate. So that is the process for both considerations for a public hearing tonight. With that, we are going to open up 7A, consideration of the approval of a planned unit development application agreement for 503 East 9 Mile, a mixed-use affordable housing development by Full Circle, as presented by the Environmental Sustainability Planner. So welcome, Erin, to the Zoom stage.
Thank you very much, Mayor. My name is Erin Quattel. I'm the Environmental Sustainability Planner for the city, and my pronouns are she and her. I'm going to present about the 503 East 9 Mile project and unit development. I'm going to give a brief intro, and then I'm actually going to turn it over to the applicant afterwards so that they can get a little bit more detail for the presentation. So in general, this is a planned unit development for the properties East 9 Mile, which is zone C2 commercial, 410 Vester Street and 414 Vester Street, which are both zoned R3 residential. And the reason this to move forward with a PUD application versus a different type of application was due to the different parcels that were being utilized in this project, as well as the underlying zoning. So this project is seeking state and local incentives through the payment in lieu of taxes, which is known as pilot program, which our Community and Economic Development Director will be discussing at the next public hearing after this item, and will be reviewed separately from this PUD review. The project is Full Circle Communities based out of Chicago, Illinois. The organization focuses on affordable housing developments with an interest in supporting the LGBTQ plus community in Ferndale for this particular project. They were in front of Planning Commission on December 2nd, 2020, where they presented their preliminary PUD application as part of our PUD requirements. And then the Planning Commission staff and community members provided feedback on that project and was given direction to proceed with a formal PUD application. The project team had at least reached out to the community and had held at least 2 community meetings to gather feedback about those plans. And the overall development meets a number of goals and recommendations in the 2017 Ferndale Master Plan, including diversification of housing types, long-term affordable housing, pedestrian and transit-oriented development, and sustainable building design. The development proposes a mix of 1- and 2-bedroom units of a total of 53 units. The maximum height of the building is 47 feet with a 52-foot parapet, and the gross square footage is over 50,000 square feet. As part of the planned unit development, there is a development agreement, and with that, there's considerations for public benefit. Some of those public benefits that they are seeking or describe as a benefit in this project is a complementary mixture of uses of housing, mixture of uses, sustainable building design and site design, transition or providing affordable housing units, diversification of housing unit types, pedestrian and transit-oriented development, coordinated development of multiple assembled parcels, removal of renovation of blighted buildings, or a site cleanup. And this site does qualify as a brownfield and will have some contamination remediated from the site. Last couple items I wanted to mention that are pertinent to this development is as part of the PUD, there are some deviations, and that's part of the overall site plan review. Those deviations relate to parking and a few design elements of the development, including some setbacks and some heights. Specifically, the deviations for parking include a deviation to include only 26 spaces for parking, reduction of EV stations, and a reduction of bike parking stations. And I also wanted to mention that this was at the Planning Commission last Wednesday, January 20th, for review and recommended approval by the Planning Commission and review for City Council. And with that, I would like to invite one of our applicants to provide any additional context for this project. And James Dow is gonna be the presenter for that.
Thank you, Erin. I figured I'd join by video so everyone can see me. I'm gonna share my screen, just a brief presentation that we have for tonight as well.
Hi, James, welcome.
Thank you. Full screen is Control H. Okay, can everybody see my screen? The PDF?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So my name is James Dow. I'm a project manager with Full Circle Communities. Also on the call, we have Carl Kunda, who's a senior project manager with Full Circle Communities, and then Jack and Ashley from Land & Bone Baker, who are our architects on this project. So I'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of their evening to join us in discussion about this development. So you heard from some of the community advocates that we're working with, but the need for age-friendly, LGBTQ-friendly, and affordable housing is greater than ever due to not just an aging baby boomer population, but economic impacts that have been compounded by COVID. So, decades of unemployment, segregation, and marriage inequality have led to higher rates of economic insecurity for LGBTQ adults. And as you heard some, specific examples, the same population is more likely to face discrimination when it comes to finding safe, quality, affordable housing. So over the last few years, there's been somewhat of a, can't quite call it a trend yet, but we've seen a few LGBTQ friendly affordable housing residents popping up in different parts of the country, mostly in larger cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Philadelphia. There's one here in Chicago. And we've studied a lot of these examples in crafting the development plan for this project. So, currently there are around, I think, 12 projects or so geared towards LGBTQ elders, and we're really excited by the prospect to add Ferndale to this growing list. So, this project got started over over 3 years ago when our team started working with some of the various LGBTQ stakeholders that you heard from earlier, looking for a project and a place to put it. And that's, become 503 East 9 Mile. And that's evolved into a multi-year process with the city staff, coming up with a project idea that fits the community character well and addresses some of the outline or some of the issues that have been outlined in the city's master planning efforts, and then also the inclusive housing plan. And we think the proposal for this project really does just that. In addition to the public meetings that Aaron has mentioned, we've met twice with community residents outside of the kind of official meetings, and a couple times with community advocates to really address any other concerns or questions that they might have in anticipation of the Plan Commission meeting last week, and then in anticipation for this meeting tonight. And over the course of the next couple slides, I'll talk about some of the feedback we've received and how we've addressed that, and then also incorporated some of their feedback into the programming of this project. Just real briefly, I want to touch on who Full Circle is as a developer, since we are from out of town. So we're a 501c3 nonprofit where supportive services and supporting residents are really the key component to all of our projects and our mission. So to achieve this goal, we dedicate 75% of all of our economics to pay for services for residents who live in our developments. And what does that mean for residents? What does that mean for the specific project? Then what does it mean that residents can expect out of Full Circle once this project is built? If we look at, a 45-year life cycle, which is how long affordability at a minimum is going to be maintained at this project, over $2.7 million is going to be put back in to this project to fund supportive services and a case coordinator. So with these dollars, we're working with general service providers like Community Housing Network, and then LGBTQ specific service organizations that you heard from tonight, like MCCD, Affirmations, and SAGE, to bring population specific services to this development. And us being a nonprofit, it also means we're the long-term owner of this development. So we're invested in the long-term success, not just from the services side of things, but also that we have a well-built, durable, attractive building that really will positively impact the community for years to come.
Hey, James, just a note, it looks like the slides haven't progressed. If you could test that out and see what's stopping it.
New share. Okay, I think this might have fixed it because I got a notification that screen sharing was paused. This was the slide you missed. Nothing fancy, just our logo. So, Aaron noted earlier that we think this PUD meets 8 of the substantial benefits outlined in the municipal code. So just to take a few minutes to focus a bit on the impact that this project will have on the larger community. So city staff and community residents, we've heard a lot from them that green space is something that's centrally important to Ferndale. So to address this, we've included an approximately 3,000 square foot open green space at the corner of Vester and Paxton. That'll consist of a large patio and native plant gardens, mixture of uses. This is a pedestrian friendly design that's got some activated ground floor space along East 9 Mile, where really bringing new housing offerings to nearby downtown Ferndale. The master plan notes there's a substantial need for housing geared towards elders, and that while there's been a decent amount of development in terms of residential, that offerings are still pretty limited. And this mix of affordable 1 and 2 bedroom units targeted towards LGBTQ elders definitely provides a housing type that isn't currently met in the community. This project, probably the biggest benefit is the 45-year affordability period that I mentioned earlier. 100% of the units in this development are set aside for households earning below 60% of area median income, and I'll talk in a bit about what AMI is in terms of dollars and how it impacts rental rates for this project. But The affordability in this project is assured by a deed restriction that's going to run with the land, meaning that affordability here at this address, at this development, is going to continue even in the event if Full Circle were to disappear or ownership were to change. And this is, this is a pretty substantial community benefit. Just looking at census data, and data shows that 20% of the households in Ferndale are cost burdened, meaning that they pay more than 30% of their income towards housing. And a 45-year affordability period goes a long way to address, the issue of being cost burdened, and can really help mitigate the impacts that high-end residential developments have had on rising housing costs in the community. Another big community benefit, which I think is pretty cool, is the community meeting hub. So this is a 1,600 square foot space designed to serve residents of Ferndale, not just for use by, residents at this development. So use of this space is going to be provided at no cost to the community. We've engaged several local, service providers about offering more general programming at this space, including MCCD, Affirmations, CHN, SAGE, Ferndale Housing Commission, and then some other healthcare focused organizations. And we really love this space. We haven't done something like this on other projects, but it really opens the development up to the greater Ferndale community and really allows for additional positive impact, not just for folks who are living at the development. Last but not least is, as with most new construction developments, it's pretty high tech and is being developed with some pretty advanced design techniques. So at a minimum, this project will be LEED Silver or equivalent certified. Rooftop is going to be designed to accommodate the installation of solar panels. All landscaping will consist of native plants. Parking lot's going to have EV stations. Our units are going to be furnished with Energy Star appliances and water conserving fixtures to lessen the impact on the environment. And as Aaron mentioned, we're doing a pretty hefty amount of environmental cleanup at a cost of around $300,000 by removing 4 underground storage tanks, removing 5,000 tons of hazardous soil, and then installing a vapor mitigation system, which will really improve the indoor air quality of the project. Touching, I guess, one last thing on sustainability is stormwater management. It's something that we heard a lot about in the community meetings and then again at the Plan Commission meetings, and just want to restate that this project is a substantial improvement over the current site conditions. So the site currently doesn't have any underground stormwater detention, and what's proposed here is going to significantly reduce the amount of runoff and release of water detention into the municipal system. So it's actually even superior to stormwater control that, just a vacant grass lot would offer. So as Aaron said, this is a 53 unit development that's a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms, definitely heavier on the 1 bedroom unit mix that we're calling age friendly, which is an important distinction. So age friendly means that in addition to a portion of our units being barrier free, that 100% of the units at this project are going to be fully adaptable, meaning at any time they can be adapted to someone who has a physical disability. And what this means is that, tenant moves in day 1, they don't need any adaptability measures in their units. 5 years later, they don't have to seek new housing, and that they're able to age in place and stay with their community, which we think is pretty powerful. Age friendly in this sense also means that we aren't age restricting this development, which is for a few reasons. The first of being is MISHDA, who we're applying to for tax credits and vouchers, won't let us restrict the voucher resources that we're receiving from them. And we really need these voucher units to serve those most in need populations, those at 30% AMI, and to be able to provide the most affordable rents possible. But it would also be a disservice to the population that we're trying to serve. And you heard a little bit this earlier, but LGBTQ elders face higher rates of physical disabilities, mental distress, and suffer from access or lack of access to services. And the health disparities that we see in this population reflect the historical and social context of their lives and the adversity that these populations have encountered. And for those reasons, their health and housing needs at, say, age like 45 or 50 look a lot different than someone who hasn't faced these same issues. And that's why a housing product like this that is so specialized is needed. So what does affordability look like at this development? I thought it'd be helpful if we kind of framed it in terms of single person or two person households. So a single person household could have a maximum income of $33,000 to income qualify for a unit at this development. And anybody under that amount is also qualified. Single person households can expect to pay a rent range of $441 to $883, depending on their annual income. And for a two bedroom household, we could accommodate ranges just below $38,000, with rental ranges of $441 again for a one bedroom, or just a little bit over $1,000 for a two bedroom unit. And pretty unique to Full Circle's developments is that all utilities are included in our rents. And we do this as a means to ensure affordability, that as utility costs continue to go up, that cost isn't passed on to our tenants. So water, heating, air conditioning, hot water, all that's covered by the rent. So residents don't have to worry about, paying utility companies. And in previous meetings, we heard comments regarding affordability. So, as part of the process of developing a deal like this, we've commissioned a third-party market study company to look at what the rental discount looks like on other brand new developments in, the greater Ferndale area, the market area. And what they found is that these rents are anywhere from a 40 to 70% discount from comparable new construction developments, which are charging anywhere from $1,500 to $1,800 for similar one or two bedroom units. In addition, as a means to deepen affordability, you heard me mention the vouchers earlier. So we're seeking vouchers from Michigan, but also from the Ferndale Housing Commission, which means units of this development are going to be affordable by working households or community residents who might be retired and on Social Security, or even those that might have a disability or reliant on SSDI. So we're really capturing a large population here. Here's just a quick look at the site plan. One thing we've heard a lot at the Plan Commission meetings and community meetings is there's been a lot of development in Ferndale. So naturally residents have concerns about traffic and safety. So after meeting with community residents as part of the, I guess it was maybe the pre-PUD, or maybe it was the pre-PUD, one of the Plan Commission meetings, we were initially showing our parking lot opening onto Vester, which is a pretty residential street. And we heard community feedback concerns about traffic and safety for kids playing on the street. So to address this, we've reoriented the parking lot to get all traffic off residential streets of Vester and Paxton to really help mitigate the impact of the project in this regard. Probably the largest thing we've heard about is parking. So this is a spot where we are seeking a deviation from the code. And we took a long look at the data of projects in our portfolio, which is over a dozen. It's not all senior, it's not all family, it's a mix of bedroom types. And what we found is that we consistently provide too many parking spaces with big asphalt lots that are never fully utilized and have a negative impact on things like stormwater management. So our data shows that 41% of available spots tend to get utilized at our developments, and really only 25% of households utilize our on-site parking that we monitor through the tag system. And one thing that might help explain this is that car ownership really isn't the most attainable thing for low-income households. High car insurance rates in Michigan, which is I think the highest in the country, couple that with annual maintenance costs, repairs, and fuel costs, and you're looking at pretty significant expenses even before looking at a lease or a loan payment. And we reached out to Ferndale Housing Commission because they've got good local data, which we don't have because we haven't had any developments yet in Ferndale. And what they show is that approximately 50% of their residents request a parking pass, which is allowed either for themselves or also for their caregivers. And their properties aren't just seniors who are 62 and over. 40% of them are in the 45 to 60 age range. So the same pocket that we're trying to serve at this development. Another deviation we're seeking is for the number of EV car spots. I think calls for 10% of parking spots which would have been 6 here. So we're requesting 3. The big thing is it's a trade-off. Building affordable housing is a cost containment problem. It's always more expensive than we wish it was, and making reductions on the number of EV spots allows us to make trade-offs for better interior amenities for residents, and quite frankly, things that are probably more important to low-income households where the cost of electrical vehicle ownership is still pretty high. They're also relatively easy to add in. So when we're talking about a 45-year project, it's not to say if there's demand in 10 years for additional spots that we can't add those into place. Part of our, sorry, my dog is barking and whining at the door. Part of our PUD packet too, to help address the concerns about parking, we've got a kind of draft agreement with the owner of the CVS, which is adjacent to the site, to lease an additional 5 parking spaces for a portion of their lot, which is actually only accessible through our project. So if parking is needed, we'll be able to access additional spots for residents. In addition, if additional parking is needed for when events are held at the community meeting hub, 2 nearby business owners, Blooms and Incubizo, have provided or have agreed to explore shared parking agreements in the future if we're needed. I think it's important to note that this is a pretty transit-rich and walkable area. You've got a CVS right next door, multiple shopping, restaurant, food, dining, bank opportunities right nearby. But from a public transit side of things, we're working with SMART, and as part of our draft development agreement, that will work with them to relocate the bus stop to right in front of this development, allowing for an improved transit facility to make the bus a more attractive option. The site also has the benefit of a few other transit options aside from the regular bus route, which we've listed here. And then also, the Housing Commission noted to me the other day that they partner with the city and SMART for an on-demand service where residents could ride free of charge, and the driver keeps track and then bills it back to the project. So we think that's a pretty cool and really inexpensive way to offer an amenity that additionally reduces the pressure on parking. So if that's an option that everyone wants to explore, we're more than happy to help bring that amenity, because it would improve the quality of life for residents at our development. And just kind of wrapping up, the need for affordable housing in Ferndale is greater than ever, and it's only growing. It's really greater than ever everywhere. The Inclusive Housing Action Plan noted that options that are considered affordable, so non-rent burdening to low-income households, decreased by almost 10% between 2012 and 2017. And, I think we can assume that rising housing costs certainly haven't helped create more affordable options that you see are decreasing. So this community engagement process that we've been going through, the plan unit development, the pilot, which you'll hear about soon from Jordan, is all key parts to our financing application that we're looking to submit to the state next week. So with that, I'd like to thank residents of Ferndale for being open to have conversations with us and provide feedback. I'd like to thank the community advocates of Ferndale, who really were the driving concept behind this project years ago, and thank Plan Commission and City Council and Mayor for considering the request for this plan unit development. And lastly, to Aaron, Justin, and Jordan at the city, who worked very hard and closely with us over the last couple of months to get us to where we are. And with that, I think we can open it up for public questions.
All right, thank you, James. This is the public hearing on the planned unit development. There is another public hearing for the same project on the tax exempt ordinance. So for now, we're going to open up the public hearing for the PUD, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes and keep your topic to this agenda item, please, for the public hearing. And Kyle, can you walk us through on the hand raisers? If you are on the Zoom meeting, please hit your blue hand to indicate your request to speak. And if you're on the phone, Kyle will also call on you.
Thank you, Mayor. Up first, we have Paul and Angela.
Good evening, Paul and Angela. Thanks for joining.
Hello, this is Angela Lepard, resident at 634 East Breckenridge. Speaking as a person with over 15 years of working with older adults and someone that is active with our local LGBT community, I wanted to share my support for this project. I support affordable housing, especially housing that targets LGBT older adults. Affordable housing in our area has become scarce, leaving a lot of our friends in the LGBT community looking elsewhere, including looking in communities that are not affirming. I can say that affordable housing for older adults is a huge unmet need too. I am aware that due to funding sources that Full Circle cannot restrict this housing by age or to LGBT plus identifying folks. However, I trust the relationships built so that they can target accordingly. Speaking as someone who's also in the neighborhood where this building is being built, I do want to voice my concerns around parking, specifically since we do have a lot of neighbors without driveways. Many of us that live between 9 Mile and Camborne, Paxton and Burdett have been here for a long time. We are surrounded by industry. The view out my window most days is Madison Heights glass, a parking lot and the railroad tracks. And this is the view that made me able to afford living here when I came here 11 years ago. And with some of the constant building and the multiple parking variances, because it has to be understood this is within the context of other things being built, I do occasionally feel slowly pushed out of my home. And I want to clarify, I wholeheartedly support the building of affordable housing. I support the Full Circle project. I think that it is in line with who we want to be as a city. I just ask that the city keep this in mind when considering other projects in our area. I think that there's consideration that this should be the project you approve. And lastly, just a full circle, I hope that the relationships you're building with local LGBT organizations and the neighbors on Vester specifically are maintained and respected. Based on our prior conversations with you, I trust that will happen. Please understand that the people living near me are supportive of what you're trying to do. We're not in our backyard part of Ferndale. Our backyard is railroad tracks and power wires and big box warehouses. So it's not about that at all. We support what you're doing. We just want to make sure that our neighbors are well taken care of. And certainly as you do that, we will support you in other projects that you want to do throughout the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. And next, Mayor, we have Mr. Flores. Mike, go ahead.
Hi, Mike.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, good evening, Council. My name is Augusto Mike Flores on Whittington Street. I'm speaking as a Ferndale resident, as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, as a former board president of Affirmation, and as a leadership member of Corktown Health Center. which is the only LGBTQ plus affirming primary care, behavioral health, and case management center in the state of Michigan. As a member of all the above, I am overwhelmingly requesting for the support of this project for all the benefits mentioned, but for the potential to address the #1 social determinant of health, which is housing insecurities. As previous speakers have mentioned, marginalized communities have been disproportionately impacted by housing inequities, which has a direct relationship and impact to health equity and its outcomes. At Corktown Health Center, our most complex patients overwhelmingly identify housing insecurity as the #1 issue. If we truly want to speak about equity issues, addressing disparities, and leading on social justice, we must support this project. Ferndale should lead by approving item 7A and item 7B. This will not only address the housing insecurities, but will also have a positive impact on health and equities that for so long have impacted a population largely ignored and forgotten. Thank you for your evening.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Next up, we had one more. I don't know where they went. But we'll try the colon 9343. If you wanted to contribute to this, go ahead. Okay. And then we have one more, Alan Hale. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks, Kyle. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Yeah, this is Alan Hale again with the Ferndale Accessibility and Inclusion Advisory Commission. I just wanted to say that I think I personally really support this project, and coming from the perspective of the commission, affordable housing and accessible housing are very much needed in Ferndale. One aspect of it that is maybe not discussed enough is accessible housing usually comes at the cost of space, and it also comes at being newer, so usually after the ADA in 1990, and a development that kind of lends itself to the size needed to make a lot of those improvements. So this project seems pretty amazing, and I'm hoping it finds its home here in Ferndale.
Thank you, Alan.
And that looks like everybody who is interested in participating, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, given that information,
Mayor, you're on mute.
well, I don't know how long I was speaking before I was indicated I was on mute, so I will start over. That concludes the public hearing based off of folks in line, and I'm closing the public hearing. Moving on, we are now moving into questions of fact for council, and remind council that if you want to debate or go into opining, that we need to go into a motion. So I'm going to open up the floor to council to ask their questions of James, Full Circle, and or staff. Who'd like to go first?
Through the mayor, since I'm the representative, the council representative on the Planning Commission, I thought I'd share some of the things that transpired over the last couple of months. So during the Planning Commission meetings over the past couple of months, a few of the concerns raised were around the design of the building, some of the architectural characteristics, and the lack of public, active public first floor, and most importantly, parking. Many PC members and more importantly, nearby residents were concerned over the number of on-site parking spaces available. So I asked staff to look at the parking utilization at Autumn House in Withington West. And what we found is that both facilities have a reduced rate of parking compared to the number of units. But that at both facilities, rarely do all the parking spaces get used. I was fine with supporting this until they presented adding a 1,600 square foot meeting room that would be made available to the general public. Most of these people that will be using the space will be traveling into Ferndale, and they will need parking. The developers have assured us that they are working on agreements with neighboring businesses such as Bloom's, CVS, and I believe they have some contact information with Credit Union One. They're going to be utilizing those parking spaces at those businesses. And based on these conversations, I'm comfortable that they will be able to offer additional on-street parking for this facility. I have also stressed to them that once the facility has opened, that management make it very clear to people using the meeting room that street parking is absolutely prohibited. My other concern is more around the lack of architectural elements. The building appears flat to me, and I'd really like to see a little more depth with maybe stonework around the windows and cornicing around the roof line. And those are those kind of details I think can be worked out after approval this evening. And I'll leave it there because I have some opining that I would like to share, but I'll wait till we have a motion.
All right. Thank you for that summary, Greg, and sorry, Councilman Pollica, and thank you for representing the council on the PC and this project. Who is next with their questions for staff and or for Full Circle? I see Councilwoman James has signaled her intent.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, and I'll let folks know as well that I have I listened to the very first Planning Commission meeting that I think was back in December or so. I've attended 2 community meetings as well as last week's Planning Commission meeting. So if it seems like I don't have a lot of questions, it's because I've heard a lot of information already. But 2 things I would like to hear a little bit more about are, you know, one, the sort of guarantees that are in place that affordable rates will be maintained. I think 45 years, there is some law in place that does guarantee it for 45 years, but I'd like to hear that clarified and expounded upon a little bit. And again, I'll take a shotgun approach here and put all my questions out for now. I wonder if you would talk a little bit about the nature of programming that's anticipated for the community space. I know that a lot of that is hard to predict in advance, and some adaptability and malleability moving forward will be in place. But for now, what are the types of uses for the community space that are planned? And that's all I've got for now.
Okay, are there more questions? If we can probably compile them for Full Circle and staff. No?
If I may, through the chair.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I believe this is more of a comment, not a question. I think what I've been hearing, or what I think I'd like to hear, is that more on the emphasis is that this will be inclusive housing for all individuals who need and want to reside here. I haven't been hearing more of that, because you cannot ask anyone their sexual orientation or anything such. So I think it's important. I've been hearing the term LGBTQ plus. So I just wondered if that's something that will be promoted in, say, the literature for this promoting this housing, because it should be, I mean, if anyone comes up and off the street and wants to reside here, I think it should be open to all of those who want to reside here. However, and I just, don't get me wrong, there's a need for senior housing, and I understand that you can't limit it to, but I think it's been mentioned before that I just hope that the word gets out to the senior communities that this is a development that's coming to Ferndale potentially, and that everyone's welcome. I also want to say that I'm extremely excited about all of the community service collaborations that are possible with this project. And I really hope that we move forward with that as well, because this can be huge in terms of individuals' needs. The ability to collaborate is going to be just a fantastic opportunity. So inclusion, I want to hear more about that, and the collaboration is a plus for me. And I'm also very excited to hear that there are neighboring businesses that are looking forward or trying to establish some sort of agreement as far as the parking, so that we can also take into consideration the needs of individuals and residents that live in that area that are concerned with the potential of overcrowding as far as parking as well. So those conversations, and those are important points that need to be taken into consideration throughout this entire project. And I thank you for being here and wanting to bring something so wonderful like this to Ferndale.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. All right, seeing no more questions from council, we'll need a motion.
Mayor?
Oops.
I would move that we approve the planned unit development application and agreement for 503 East 9 Mile, a mixed-use affordable housing development by Full Circle, as presented by the Environmental Sustainability Planner, with the findings and conditions as laid out in the packet.
Support.
Moved by Polika and supported by Councilwoman Mikulski. So now we'll open it up to further comment to council and questions and opining.
Well, Mayor, if I may, there are senior housing facilities that are welcoming to LGBTQ persons, but they are very far and few between. It's a generational thing. While people under the age of 50 are much more accepting of the LGBTQ community, there is a much greater chance that a heterosexual person over the age of 70 being less accepting and more comfortable openly expressing anti-LGBTQ hateful slurs and making older LGBTQ persons feel threatened. And no one should ever feel threatened in a place they call home. Sadly, because of this, I know a number of older LGBTQ persons who fear being forced into the closet if they have no choice but to move into a housing facility that does not support the LGBTQ community. And just as bad, you have LGBTQ persons who, for a variety of reasons, should be living in a senior facility, housing facility, but they stay in their home, which may not serve their current health needs, or worse, they cannot afford to move, so they can't afford the home or afford the move, so they eat unhealthy or stop taking medications. So facilities that support LGBTQ seniors are crucial to the health and well-being of our community. And one last thing, I knew Ray for decades, Ray Shepard. Anyone who is involved in the LGBTQ community over the past 30 plus years probably crossed paths with Ray. He was such a wonderful, kind, and generous man, and I think it is very fitting that this new facility be named after him. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Other comments from council? Seeing none, I will take the opportunity for me to say a few things. I just want to say thank you to all the residents who've came tonight and expressed their thoughts, but also participated in the community meetings with Full Circle. and the Planning Commission. And I really appreciate Full Circle for going above and beyond the standard outreach that is typically required in other cities. I think that's what sets us apart here. And I appreciate you stepping forward and honoring that in the neighborhood, because our neighborhoods are going through quite a few changes, particularly the streets that are adjacent to our main corridors on West 9 Mile and in our downtown. And, you know, we're also seeing changes in parking and in transit. And I have a feeling it's going to accelerate in the next couple of years if a transit millage is passed and more investment is made and people start considering doing mode shifts a little bit more from driving and taking other modes. But for me, I hear residents talking about, you know, it's a common theme, and we take it very seriously in the city. It is the demand of parking and the parking onto the neighborhood when a new development comes in that is higher intensity use than what was there before, as this project is. And I always go back to that a parking spot is actual real estate, and real estate costs money, and that piece of real estate takes money to care for a parking spot, and someone has to pay for it. And when we require more, these housing developments have more parking, the renter is usually the one who pays for that piece of real estate, and their rents go up. So it is a balance between finding, you know, working with the developer of saying, these are the number of units. If we put more parking on it and fewer units, that means the cost goes up per rent for a unit. And I always come back to, are we housing people or are we housing cars? And what do we value? And I think there's been a good balance strike here with this project. Particularly across the street is a parking deck for a bank that's closed on the weekends for most of the time. I really think there's creative solutions that the Planning Commission and staff and Full Circle have explored here with the surrounding businesses. And that could eventually change in the future too. Who knows what will happen to those properties 10, 15 years from now in the 45-year span of this project. So I go back to housing for people or housing for cars, and this project is about housing people at the foremost at rents that they can afford, and that requires a different approach. It requires subsidy, which is coming up next in our next public hearing, in order to make it work, because the market doesn't deliver this on its own. The fair value market does not provide that. So I'm totally in favor of this project. Not everybody's going to like the design. Not everybody's going to like the number of spots, but I think this is the right balance for this project, given where we are at this moment in time. All right, with that, we need, oops.
Madam Mayor, do you mind if I chime in? I wasn't quite ready when you called for us before.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I apologize that I wasn't ready. I had to kind of get my thoughts together. But first, I do hope that we get some answers to the questions that we posed a few minutes ago before we vote. But in anticipation of those answers, I do have some comments and some statements that I want to make. One, this is a tremendous opportunity to bring not just a few units of affordable housing to downtown Ferndale, but dozens of units of affordable housing to downtown Ferndale. That alone is incredibly exciting and fulfilling. Not only that, but the fact that this project is LGBTQ affirming, elder supportive, barrier free, easy adaptations, all of those factors are incredibly needed and incredibly exciting. And I do want to echo some of the concerns that were raised in my neighborhood. This is my neighborhood. I'm a block and a half away. So it doesn't impact me personally as much as some of my neighbors. But I do have a really good sense of the neighborhood. I know what a burden parking and increased traffic and lots of recent construction have put on this neighborhood. I'm not insensitive to that. In fact, I'm very sensitive to that and have expressed that to the folks at Full Circle a number of times. So they are well aware that if we approve this, we're going to expect them to be good neighbors during this process. I will say that with the parking, I am cautiously optimistic that in terms of residential parking, that not only the research that Full Circle has done within their projects, but feedback that we've gotten from our own Housing Commission and also at last week's Planning Commission meeting, one of the commissioners has some experience with mixed income developments in the city of Detroit that had similar statistics in terms of low need for cars as compared to single family dwellings. And that's just sort of a comment that I want to make, that it's very difficult for a single family neighborhood to trust and believe that an affordable sort of higher density development needs less space for cars than those single family homes do. Again, I'm cautiously optimistic that the data is going to bear out here, and that for residential purposes, there will be adequate parking. I am a little bit concerned, but still hopeful that through agreements of adjacent properties for shared parking, that for special events, some accommodations and some agreements can be made, and that also the programming for those special events can avoid situations that burden the neighborhood with extra cars. That's my main concern, frankly. I also want to acknowledge that there's a lot of concern in this area for stormwater management. This is a neighborhood that has had a lot of sewer backups during significant rain events. But through the previous meetings, we've talked about those concerns. And it is my understanding, and maybe someone on staff will speak to this at some point, that actually with new development comes new infrastructure that actually slows the release of stormwater runoff into our collective city systems, and that this may actually ease the burden on the neighborhood as opposed to adding to it. And then the last couple of comments that I want to make is that I appreciate that the proposed development sort of hugs the building itself, kind of hugs 9 Mile and Paxton more so than Vester Street, that there's actually more space between the building and the street there where it actually faces single family residences. I think that was a thoughtful, assuming it was an intentional design. And that again, with the recent construction of the 409 on 9, the possibility of Vester Square at some point in the future, and some other more localized construction within that area in the neighborhood, that just the process of construction itself, that loud, noisy, uncomfortable phase, I hope that can go as smoothly as possible with some thought and some compassion toward the neighborhood. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
And if someone can answer the questions that Councilwoman James had posed.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So first question, guarantees in place for affordability. There are two. So by our charter actually prevents Full Circle from owning market rate property. But legally, it'll be held in place by what's called a land use restriction agreement. And we included, I think we included an example of it in our PUD application for another development we did, but it goes through a number of years and even gets down to X number of units at 30% AMI, 40% AMI. So it's really like very specific, and it runs with the land of the site. So anytime someone does a title search, that'll be popped up. For uses for the community space, larger but still small kind of LGBTQ meetings. So 1,600 square foot is not super large, probably. Well, in Chicago, it's like a three bedroom. But we're also interested in more like neighborhood uses. So we're open to building more community partnerships who are interested in using that space. And totally hear your comments and other neighborhood comments on Vesture. We're fully committed to being a good neighbor, not just now, but as we get under construction, as issues pop up, we're happy to help tackle and solve any issues together. Let's see. I have other questions I wrote down. Councilmember Polika. So just like comments about design, we can like take a look at things in the future should the project get awarded, but of course, like as long as nothing triggers any issues related to zoning. And Mayor, we hear you about the credit union. I know that's a spot that's come up a few times. We tried to make contact, but didn't. But any assistance we can get to get in contact with them to try to convince them that this would be a good use for their lot would be great. Let's see, Councilmember Lisa May. So when we talk about like inclusive environment for tenants, so that talks about having house rules and basically a zero tolerance policy for anything that's not an inclusive environment. It's specific training for property management. And I wanted to use an example of the project here in Chicago, which is called Town Hall Apartments. It's a little over 50% LGBTQ and, not restricted based on sexuality. And it's not a project just for individuals who may identify as part of this community, but there's a lot of good case studies or examples of elders who aren't part of that community, but whose kids are. And they want an inclusive space where their family can come visit them that may not be offered at other properties where they could choose to live at. And lastly, I'll note that Full Circle, we have a commitment to racial equity. And in 2021, our boards set aside $100,000 for us to look at our anti-racism policies and evaluate our existing developments, pipelines that we're going to do in the future, and then just our general policies as well. So it is something we're still growing at and learning, but it is something that's very important to us. I think that might have been all the questions, but if I missed one, please someone let me know.
Thank you, James, for following up on those questions from council. At this point, we have a motion on the floor. All of council has made comments. One last chance for council before vote call. Going once, going twice. All right, Madam Clerk, can we have the vote call, please?
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
Councilmember Polika?
Absolutely, yes.
Councilmember James?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana?
Yes, and that passes unanimously. All right, so now we are going to end 7A and move on to 7B, which is part 2 of this project, which is the financial subsidy. So now we are going to go into consideration of ordinance City of Ferndale tax exemption ordinance 503 East 9 Mile Limited Dividend Housing Association Limited Partnership as presented by the CED director. And again, the public hearing for this is number 1 is staff presentation. Number 2 is public hearing, opening that up for public comment. And then 3, council members, and then 4, motion deliberations. So welcome, Jordan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, members of the public. Thank you for being here. As the Mayor said, I'm going to present the second act of the show regarding 503 East 9 Mile, a little project you might have heard something about tonight. I'm going to go ahead and repeat an oft-repeated Zoom cliche and share my screen. And could I get a couple head nods if this showed up? Perfect, thank you very much. So what I'm going to focus on, and the developer team did a great job talking about the overall concept. So I'm going to keep this sort of at highlights. And I'm just going to kind of talk about what is a pilot, what is the incentive request, highlight some of the numbers that are in the staff report, and just kind of create a platform for dialogue about that, just so folks know how this works and what's involved. And so without further ado, I'm going to go right through that. Bear with me here. Are the slides advancing? I'm not sure if they're doing it on that screen. You should see a pretty busy slide. So if you are able to see it, you'll see a little bit about process. I wanted to just kind of highlight just how did we get here, what does this all look like, and how do these things work? Also, just in case you forgot them, there's some standards about engaging during the public hearing section of this. So obviously the incentive process in orange here, it runs parallel to the process that led to the PUD, which was just considered. And they all culminate here at City Council. And so I do want to throw a quick kudos to the developer because running these two parallel is not an easy task, but these folks really respected our process. They respected community engagement and deadlines and submitting materials that answered questions and were prepared. So that's really why they were able to do this. And not every developer, as many Ferndale residents know, not every developer is capable of delivering that. So kudos there. But you can see how this works. It's essentially an enhanced staff review for this type of incentive, which is a pilot. We have what's called an incentives committee, which is an informal task force that involves key departments. So what it is CED usually reviews things from a staff level on the planning side. When it comes to incentives, we pull in members of every process, representatives from City Council, the Planning Commission, the Brownfield Authority, the Finance Director, the City Manager's Office, even the Downtown Development Authority. We like to make sure that there's sort of an all-hands-on-deck review at different levels of expertise, and also I would be remiss in not mentioning the City Attorney. We like to make sure all the angles are covered on these kind of requests because as the Mayor read that nice title of the ordinance, which you can thank the state of Michigan for on the template, there's a lot of legal statute that informs how these things come together. And so what we're talking about today is a pilot. And so what is that? Payment in lieu of taxes. I won't read every word on these slides, but and for folks who are able to dive into the staff report, there's a sort of long form version of this, but basically it allows a tax reduction for affordable housing. The state created this option and it gives cities like us 2 options in putting a pilot together. So you can see those options here on the slide. We recommended option 2. Again, I'm trying not to read a bunch of text, being cognizant of the hour and the rest of the agenda. I can go deep on this if folks have questions, but I wanted to just focus that we're recommending option 2, which is a pilot that is 4.5% of annual rents from the project, which translates to about $21,000 a year for 45 years. The value of this incentive is about $133,000 over those 45 years. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the financials in a moment, but I wanted to start with just framing what is a pilot, how does it work? And I wanted to talk a little bit about cash flow. I recognize that especially in the staff report, I don't know if there's any spreadsheet fans out there, but those can tend to make you go cross-eyed if you're not familiar with them. So I wanted to pull out the key numbers and just show how an incentive like this fits into a project and why it's so critical for something like affordable housing in particular. You can see the project costs in the orange and green boxes there. You can see the costs and the funding sources. and those add up, thankfully. It's always nice when math works out that way. But what is really important to point out here is the cash flow. So this project would not be viable as an affordable housing project without this subsidy. You can see kind of what I mean by that in the blue box there. Without the pilot, if this were a market rate development, and James did a great job kind of highlighting the comparison in rental rates, we all know what the market is capable of delivering. This is something that just this slide here really demonstrates, in my mind, why it's so important for the government to get involved in the affordable housing business, because it's not possible otherwise. And you can see, if you remember in that first slide, for the folks who read that quickly, one of those options is a pilot at 10% of shelter rents. Even that level of subsidy has the project underwater. It's not financially feasible. So putting the pilot at 4.5%, the developers initially requested 4. Through negotiation with the incentives committee and the developer, we landed at 4.5. That allows this project to what they call pencil out. It allows it to be financially viable so that it can sustain itself without further assistance, and allows you to preserve that affordability. So that's why this incentive is so critical, and that's where it shows up in the pro forma there. You can see the MSHDA assistance that James alluded to is a huge part of their funding. But that's why it's such a powerful tool for affordable housing. That's exactly why it exists, to be that share of funding to allow these projects to happen. And so for our part, we're helping on the cash flow side. So that's kind of just a general slide. The staff report goes a little deeper on these numbers, but these are the highlights, just so you can kind of see. Major project benefits, I won't repeat too much of this. It was talked about quite well in the previous item. But these are your benefits here. You know, when we're looking at incentives, what do we get for our investment? So one key stat I want to point out here is, on average, and the staff report talks about this, but on average, this project will cost us in about, on average over the 45 years, about $2,900 a year in reduced taxes. So you'll notice in the staff report, I kind of talk about the payment of the pilot, but also the net to the city. You'll look in those, around page 3, these spreadsheets begin, and you'll see that there's other taxing jurisdictions that benefit from taxes, which is something we all know, right? Our net from project, from the property as it currently is taxed, is about $8,100. So we would be looking at about $2,900 less over the course of 45 years. That starts at about a reduction of $1,800, and it grows to a little over $4,000. So you average that out over 45 years. You're talking about a $2,900 hit per year to the city in exchange for all of this. And excuse me, it was important for me to point out that for that $2,900, this may seem like a little bit of a rhetorical point. There's no way that we could construct or maintain this type of benefit, even if you just looked at the public green space for that kind of money. So it's a pretty fair trade, in my opinion, as staff. And so I wanted to be able to prove that out and show it. So there was also the questions about how this gets monitored and assured. There's actually a couple tools built into the approval items tonight, one of which was in the PUD agreement that was just approved. The developer, and this I appreciate it as a sign of really respecting our processes and a need for tracking and accountability and flexibility. They're committed to looking at the possible service impacts of this project over time and generating a report with us on that. We have the ability to negotiate additional payments if necessary. There's legal framework for that. But this council will get a report within 16 months of approval if this item is approved. That's one element of the PUD agreement. In addition, you can see these 3 things here. MSHDA, the state of Michigan, will monitor the project, and there's reporting that goes along with it that's required to maintain the tax credit. We have access to the information. Additionally, through our rental licensing inspection process here in Ferndale, we'll be ensuring the maintenance of affordable rates in concert with MSHDA, as well as the PUD approval itself protects a lot of the benefits that were discussed as well, the community hub, the green space, and so on. There's terms in those agreements for that. So there's a lot of layers of protection. And again, I don't want to sound biased, but I think it's important to point out that the developer came to the table more than willing to embrace those kinds of accountabilities. Again, not every developer does that. So that is something that is worthy of note. And that's why this is such a strong agreement. And so with that, that's generally the incentives. I want to just kind of pause back on the process slide here, and I'll leave this here just again in case people need the tips and tricks for engaging. But please feel free to hit me with any questions or comments. I would like to kick it back to James if he has anything that he would like to add on behalf of the team for the incentives request.
Thanks, Jordan. I guess the only thing that I'll add, which you kind of highlighted, but pilots are pretty common. Well, they're very common in the state of Michigan for affordable housing developments for all the reasons that Jordan noted. You need it for deals to pencil out. And what it means for this project is it gives us the ability to build this type of impactful development in a neighborhood or a city of choice where people really want to live in. The community that wants this project picked Ferndale. And without this tool, property taxes become too burdensome either to serve lowest income households or those most in need, or if you can get it to pencil out, it soaks up all the additional cash flow that Full Circle puts back in the project to pay for services, which as part of our mission is really central to the project and develop housing that has extremely positive outcomes. So that's the only thing I'd add, Jordan. But happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
All right, I think this is the conclusion of staff's presentation. And so now I'm going to open up the public hearing. And again, our assistant city manager will take hand raisers from Zoom. Please click your blue button if you have a comment to make. And if you're on the phone, Kyle will walk you through that process. And Kyle, why don't you take it away? And folks, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So if anybody's interested, go ahead and raise your hand now. Sean Tobin, go ahead.
Hi, Sean.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Yep.
Hi, I'm a resident at 3140 Minerva, and I was just wanting to raise my hand, double check to make sure I'm on the same page. All of the incentives on the table are pilot related. I think it was Aaron when they presented for item 7B before Mr. Dow presented, there was a mention of brownfield, and I don't see any discussion of that now. So I'm guessing maybe they misspoke. Just double checking. Otherwise, sounds like a good project. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Thanks, Sean. I'm gonna just ask, I'm gonna hold off and we'll collect all the questions, and then James, you can answer them because I know that's an important one. Is there any other folks?
No other hands at this time, Mayor, but we will try the phone with the last 4 digits, 9343, just in case.
They might be holding out for the short-term rental ordinance, So.
Yeah, I don't hear anything. So that looks like everybody who wanted to speak, Mayor.
Okay. With that information, I'm going to conclude public comment for the public hearing and close public comment. And if James, you can answer that resident's really insightful question.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sean, there are no brownfield incentives being sought. I think when we use the word brownfield in the staff report, it just means that there's environmental cleanup, which in Michigan is pretty common, but we're like a brownfield TIF or grant from Eagle. We're not seeking those incentives, just the pilot.
Just to summarize, the developer is covering those costs without outside help. So, okay, so at this point, I'm going to open it up for council to ask their questions about this item. Are there questions from council?
If I may, through the chair.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I just wanted to comment that I am part of the Economic Incentives Committee. And Jordan, I just wanted to let you know that I really appreciate you hearing our questions and our concerns and going back to the developer to relay those concerns and then coming back to us and letting us know the results of the answers to our questions. So I know you've worked very hard on that, and I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate you taking those steps and getting us together and informing us as you did. I just wanted to say that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, see no questions from council.
Mayor, I would like to move that we approve the ordinance section 17-41 through 17-47, City of Ferndale Tax Exemption Ordinance 503 East 9 Mile Limited Dividend Housing Association Limited Partnership, as presented by the CED Director.
Support.
Moved by Polika and supported by Mikulski. Are there any comments or final questions on this item? All right, so I'm going to wrap up and sort of say thank you to everybody here. First, I want everybody to know that each council member has had a part in this process along the way. I, like Mayor Pro Tem, was on the Incentives Committee. Councilman Polika was on the Planning Commissions, giving his feedback through that avenue. And Councilman Mikulski and James attended the community meetings and listened to residents, as we all have. But we all played a very important role from the beginning of this project so that it meets the community values and the community needs. And I also wanted to say thank you to staff, particularly Aaron Quintel, our environmental planner, Jordan Torty, who managed the incentive sides, and Justin Lyons, who's on the planning team as well. But Cheryl Stubblefield is our finance director and really was orchestrating the incentives and the impact on the city's taxes and budget, and looking ahead 45 years of what that could mean for the council at that time. But also what happens when the incentive ends 45 years from now, and hopefully put positioning the project and the city council in the future in a very good position to renegotiate at that time as well. So not looking just at what's here now, but what's in the future to come, so that this property can stay affordable going more than 45 years. With that, I'm gonna hand it over to Madam Clerk to do the vote call. And thank you to our residents for your patience and involvement on this project. We can't do anything really of this substantial effort without your input and have it meet the needs of the community. So thank you. All right, Madam Clerk.
Okay, Councilmember Polika.
Yes.
Councilmember James.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May.
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski.
Yes.
And Mayor Piana.
Yes. This project has been approved, and now this moves forward, and you'll be hearing from staff and Full Circle about the construction process. And I think you still have to go through the Planning Commission and some rezoning as well. So more to come, folks. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. I'm going to read everything, and it's a long one. All right, so 8A, approval of the regular meeting minutes of December 21st, 2020 and January 11th, 2021 as submitted by the city clerk. 8B, resolution to fly the Pan-African flag of the exterior City Hall flagpole for the month of February 2021. 8C, approval of reappointments to boards and commissions as submitted by city clerk. 8D, consideration of the purchase of RFID key fobs for the downtown compactor enclosure and future bike locker rooms in the amount of $6,155. 8E, approval of renewing the Transportation Improvement Association membership in the amount of $6,510 charged to Major Streets membership dues, account number 202-000-958 as submitted by the DPW director. 8F, approval of the attached employment agreement for Teresa Robinson, our new fire chief, submitted by the Human Resources Director. 8G, request to backfill 2 police officer positions open due to recent registrations as requested by the Human Resources Director. 8H, request to backfill 1 mechanic position left open due to the recent departure of a mechanic as submitted by the Human Resource Director. 8I, approval to pay for emergency vehicle repairs of platform 11-8 to R&R Fire Truck Repair, Inc. at a cost of $7,348.87 from account 101-336-7775-1, repair and maintenance vehicles as submitted by the interim fire chief. 8J, consideration of the approval of the maintenance and license agreement for 503 East 9 Mile by Full Circle as presented by the planning manager. 8K, approval of the bills and payrolls as submitted by the city manager's office and subject to review by the council finance committee. What is the pleasure of council?
Mayor, I move that we accept the consent agenda items as presented.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May and supported by Polika. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember James,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May,
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski,
Yes.
Councilmember Polika,
Yes.
and Mayor Piana.
Yes. Thank you, Council. And moving on to the regular agenda, 9A is consideration to confirm the appointments of Kimberly Croft and Tricia Wackerly to the Beautification Commission for the terms ending December 31st, 2024. And wanted to let you know that we received 2 applications this month for these 2 positions, and I have spoken to each Kimberly and Tricia, and they are eager to serve and think they would be a good fit to the Beautification Commission. And I don't know if they're on attending tonight. I said if they were interested that they could come and say hello.
We have Kimberly. Let me search for the other applicant.
I just see Kimberly.
Hello, this is Kimberly. Nice to talk to you all virtually. I'm pretty excited to join. I really love Ferndale and the community, and I really just want to get more involved and continue that community aspect that I think is really unique, especially in a big town like Metro Detroit. So I appreciate this opportunity.
Thanks, Kimberly, and thanks for hanging out tonight to get to this point.
Absolutely. It's always interesting to hear what's going on. I mean, that's the what's great about the city is that we're always up to date. You know, it's easy to hear what's going on.
All right. So with that in mind,
Mayor, I move to confirm the appointments of Kimberly Craft and Tricia Wackerly to the Beautification Commission for terms ending December 31st, 2024, as submitted by the city clerk.
Support.
sorry, I hit my mute. Moved by Councilwoman James and supported by Councilwoman Mikulski. Madam Clerk.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May,
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski,
Yes.
Councilmember Polika,
Yes.
Councilmember James,
Yes.
and Mayor Piana.
Yes. Thank you for serving. We love our volunteers. And I look forward to seeing the new creative things coming out of the Beautification Commission. All right, 9B, consideration of project management proposal from Hubble, Roth, and Clark. Clark, in the amount not to exceed $206,200 for the lead service line replacement program. And I'm going to hand that over to Joe, and I'm going to get a glass of water.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, through the chair, if we could confirm that our DPW deputy, Dan Antosik, and our representatives from HRC, Brad Shepler, can be escalated to panelists. And the while that occurs, a brief background. This position is a contractual service that will be introduced by the Deputy DPW Director, Dan Antosik, who is the city's project manager overseeing the lead service line replacement program. This recommendation is a critical component to forward progress that we will be presenting to council about lead service line replacements this spring. That will be involved this first year of our undertaking of lead service line replacement. Dan needs to be unmuted, Kyle.
Should be able to unmute himself as a panelist, but
I don't see his name on the list.
yeah.
Dan, one moment, please.
There you go.
Dan, can you confirm that you are able to speak?
There we go. Can everyone hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, Dan, why don't you introduce the contract and then why it's important to this project?
Yes, good evening tonight, Mayor and Council. So, as most of you may recall, we have been working through a lead service line replacement and verification project via a drinking water revolving loan fund with the state of Michigan. We've been going through that process for, excuse me, about 7 months now. And last week we got to the point where we were able to do a bid opening for lead service line replacement and verification as part of this project. With the plan to bring forth the tentative resolution for contract award to council here at the coming meeting and begin replacement of lead service lines along with verification work here in March and April. So as part of that, and to keep everything moving forward as we would like, we have taken a look at the estimated amount of work that it's going to take to coordinate this project and the scale that we are looking to do our replacements at. So, you know, we had a 7% requirement that we need to meet by September 30th of 2021 because we had a lead action level exceedance this past year during our sampling period. So we took a look at what that's going to take in terms of scheduling, working to schedule appointments. So that will be coordinating and making sure that we get access agreements out to all those folks that we need to get replacements done as part of our prioritization. Scheduling meetings with the contractor, the property owner, so we can say, hey, this is where we need to access. We're going to come through the basement. We may need to have some items moved, stuff like that. Answer those follow-up questions that the property owners may have in terms of that, and be that point person as we move through this process with the selected vendor that we'll be using for the replacements themselves. And then in addition to that, we will also be utilizing this position to help keep track of the verification work that's going to be going on. Not only did we plan to have this position or with the DWRF loan to do replacements, we also plan to do verification work with this also. So part of that will also be covered within this, in addition to the verification work that we will be doing on the city side of things to help keep things move forward, so we can plan our replacements in for the years to come. So we took a look at HRC to help us out with a project management proposal as a stopgap issue while we work through what this position would look like as an internal position here in the city of Ferndale. What that total cost would be for that position, in addition to what that project manager is going to require, vehicle, office space, and so on. So HRC provided us with a proposal for a project manager with some back-end help with GIS, in addition to some higher level staff as we work through this first year of the DWRF loan. That estimated number that HRC provided us with was $206,000 for, replacing approximately 700 service lines this year. And when looking at that, it's tough to gauge how much time this may take for the project manager to do scheduling. I know in the past, when we encountered the replacement issue of lead service lines on a water main project, it took us a few weeks to gather, 14 signatures. As simple as it may sound to just kind of coordinate all this, there's a lot that goes into it. And if we learned anything over this past year with the water meter replacement program, it can be quite difficult to get people to schedule to do some of these important things as far as upgrading a water meter, or what'll be even more important is replacing that lead service line that is at the property. So HRC provided us with a proposal that came in at $206,000. So to put that into perspective, you may recall that we joined South Oakland County Water Authority, and we took a look at a request for proposal for lead service line verifications and replacements with our surrounding communities. In that proposal, we specifically added in items to where a community could do as much as they had the ability to, or do absolutely nothing. So comparing that to the costs provided by HRC, within that South Oakland County Water Authority contract, the cost would be approximately $490,000 if we were going to pay the contractor to do all of that work. So, we knew that this would likely be an item coming down the road. So one of the things that we did when we broke out the cost within the DWRF loan is we did allocate some dollars that would go towards administrative and engineering costs, because we knew that those would be a thing. So whether, it's, let's say, paying HRC directly for the stopgap measure while we figure out things internally for, City of Ferndale employee to take on this work, because right now with staff at the DPW, we do not have the bandwidth to dedicate this, what we're anticipating as being basically a full-time position to accommodate the number of lead service lines that we would like to get replaced. So one of the things that we can do, like I said, is, choose to pay those dollars to HRC, or we can also do force account with the DWRF loan, where, the city, since it will be a new budgeted for position, that we could basically pay for that position with the loan that we allocated over the next few years. So overall, we would like to that we take a serious consideration with the HRC for project management of this line replacement and verification that we'll be doing this year, as we look internally at what that means to have this position in-house. And at this time, I can take any questions that you may have to. We do have with HRC, who's been working with us over the past few years and water-related items, and really working through this DWRF loan with us. So with that, I will turn questions over to.
Thank you, Dan, for that presentation. And thank you, Mr. Scheller, for being here as well. Questions for council?
Through the chair, I could start. I was curious about the timeline for all of this. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Where would you like me to start the timeline?
So when would they start working? How long would they work?
Okay, so in terms of what we would start doing and when we would start doing it, so we are almost at the point where we have finalized our access agreements and those types of agreements. So as soon as all parties involved on the staff side of things are happy, Dan Christ, our city attorney, is happy with those documents, we're going to start going after access agreements. Now, this is something that we want to get started in the month of mid-February, getting those and preparing for some service line replacements that want to begin in the month of March. So really, I know that HRC could provide us with this employee, as early in the next couple of weeks to get started on the groundwork of these access agreements. We do have the anticipated list of addresses that we'd like to take a look at and start planning that out, in addition to some verification work that we need to get done. So very short time frame is what we're looking at, the short answer.
Through the chair, I would just also offer that we do intend to provide a public presentation that summarizes lead service line replacement policy, easement agreements, and then the actual verification and construction project that will be forthcoming this spring. We'll be providing that on February 8th as a follow-up to this item.
I do have one more question. Roughly how many homes do we think we can get to this year? I feel like I'm just missing it on this agreement. Is it the 700 lead service line replacements? Is that how many homes we're assessing?
So in terms of replacements, we're going to do our best to hit our requirement that the state has set for our 7% number. And that is between now and September 30th. So the original number set by the state is approximately 700. I think 182 to be exact, September 30th. And then we're just going to keep chugging at that number. So, the way the loan worked for us, we can draw down on that $10 million. If in a crazy world, all we do is lead service line replacements 24/7, 365 over the course of the year, and hypothetically we can replace 1,000. We're going to try and replace 1,000 of those and just hammer that out. But the goal is to try and get 700 of those done so we can meet our requirements.
So, are there any other questions from council? All right. I had one. I'm sorry, I have a distracting cat beat by my feet right now. Will they be tracking time of how long what it takes to interact with one household on average, so that we have an understanding of how much of time is being spent to take a homeowner from the beginning to the end and the completion of their lead line? Because that's going to be helping us understand the full-time needs, because this is a short-term contract to contract out this service, looking at it for 1 year and then potentially bringing it in-house to understand what the costs are and the timing is to ramp up to have it in-house capacity, right?
Through the chair, Brad, could you possibly address how you'll be tracking labor and submitting those progress reports?
Yes, I can do that. Thank you for having me, Council. So tracking by home will be very difficult. We are trying to get 700 to 1,000 homes done in a year. We'll do our best to associate our timesheets with the pay applications by the contractor. They can kind of give you an idea of, okay, we did 30 homes this week and it took X amount of time. It's going to be a lot of running around. It's going to be a full-time position. There's just a lot of work that needs to be done, as Dan kind of explained. And, so we'll do our best. We will have an average. I don't think we can give you it took X amount of hours for this address and X amount of hours for this address, but we can give you a pretty good average, I'm sure.
Okay. Yeah, the purpose of my question was to having a good data set at the end that says this is how much capacity we need. And will it be a full-time position, or is it going to be less or more. So I think that's what I'm looking at the end of this contract. How will staff use that data to take it forward?
You will only be charged for the hours we work on that specific project as well. So you will know how many hours it takes, and hopefully by the end we will be pretty efficient at it as well. So we'll be getting the routine down. Unfortunately, some homeowners need a little bit more time with the program manager to discuss what's going on. Some sign very quickly and are eager to do it. Some are hesitant to allow people into their homes and construction in their homes and things like that. So it's variable when it comes to communicating with each of the homeowners. We want to take the care that's necessary for that, because we are going to be going into their homes and potentially affecting their basements in most cases.
Yeah. I have a higher level question that may or may not be answerable tonight, but the 5% replacement number, and then 7% if you've exceeded their limits standards by Eagle, those standards were put in place without a pandemic, and a lot of people are hesitant to have people in their house during the pandemic. And I was wondering, do we need to have a conversation with Eagle if we're having those challenges of meeting the 7% by the end of the year because of pandemic-related issues and concerns? I think that's a real issue that needs to be talked with Eagle. We might not hit 7% the first 6 months. We might be jammed at the end of the year and are going to have problems getting it processed because of people's desire not to have people in their homes. It's a real risk, in my opinion.
I could likely touch on that for you, Mayor. One of the things that we'll be doing is we're going to be looking at our actual inventory that we have for our lead service lines. We are going to take the additional data points that we were able to collect over the course of the water meter replacement program, take a look at that, take a look at other information such as age of our water mains, housing stock, that sort of thing, and see if we have the ability to recalculate what our 7% number is based on the new information that we were able to learn over the course of this past year. And while we want to replace as many lead service lines as possible, it may be an opportunity for us, speaking with Eagle, to decrease our required number right now based on a new calculation of their information versus the unknown information when we submitted our preliminary distribution systems material inventory. In addition to that, one of the fun things we got to do during the pandemic was do a water meter replacement program and working through those items. And I will say, on the backside of things, we were able to replace, I believe it was 3,000 to 4,000 water meters post shelter in place order during the course of this year. So we're hoping that with the additional PPE precautions that we put into place, our contractors are going to be required to follow a COVID-19 protocol. Just that's more so commonplace that we have today, that we're hoping that we should be able to get solid participation and meet the 7% number that we're required to, just off of the learning we were able to have in entering homes and stuff like that over the course of this past year.
Okay. I hear you express some confidence around being able to meet the 7%. I still think it needs to have a conversation with Eagle about it, though. Put it on record. Other questions from council? All right, we need a motion.
I move that we approve the project management proposal from Hubble, Roth, and Clark in the estimated amount of $206,200 for the lead service line replacement program as submitted by the DPW Deputy Director.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May and supported by Councilwoman Mikulski. Madam Clerk, please.
Councilmember Polika?
Yes.
Councilmember James?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana?
Yes. All right. We are moving on to the final regular agenda item 9C, consideration of an ordinance to amend Chapter 7, Business Regulations and Licenses, generally of the Ferndale City Code, Article 7, Public Lodging Houses and Multiple Dwellings, to add Division 3, Short-Term Rental Licensing. And I wanted to thank all of our residents who are still on this meeting and hanging tight to the last agenda item at 9:40. I know it's late. And so I'm going to pass this over to Emily Loomis, who I think is going to be walking us through the presentation on this item. Welcome, Emily.
Good evening, Mayor Piana and Council. Thank you for bringing this to consideration tonight. I want to start off first by saying I appreciate the time and attention that both staff and the residents and property owners who have participated in our focus group that helped inform our discussion in regards to this ordinance, this proposed ordinance. I know it's a time commitment asking a lot of people to stay late, and so I always appreciate that. And we drew on them twice, and we're probably going to draft them again 1 or 2 more times in the next year as we see if this ordinance is adopted. We'll probably ask for their time again. So with that, I'd like to dive into my PowerPoint here. Just get my slideshow started. Okay. Is the slideshow visible for everybody?
No, Emily, I don't see anything yet.
Okay. All right.
There you go.
Yep.
Perfect. So we'll just start at the beginning. Short-term rentals. It's a long phrase. So you're going to hear us actually say STR quite a bit and see it noted in the documentation as STR, but it's a short-term rental, and that's going to be anything that is for residential use, or to just be more exact, it's home, condo, apartment, and that's going to be something that is offered on nightly or weekly basis for a period of less than 30 days. That's going to be the distinction from, say, our single to 2-family or multifamily rental ordinance, which are annual and biannual, respectively. Currently in Ferndale, while we don't have a consistent number, just because we've seen it driven by events, as we're all very well aware. The event season in Ferndale during non-pandemic years is incredibly active, April through November. So obviously we do see an increase within our market of STRs, but on average we see between 30 and 90 unique short-term rental properties offered on online or the respective brokerage sites for short-term rentals. So as I think we've seen even just tonight in the rest of the presentations, it is our policy or best practice, I should say, within the city that we let the public voices be heard and the community guide our direction. So within that, we were guided to create a focus group of residents and business owners, or STR owners, or just landlords within the city of Ferndale that would help us examine the impacts that short-term rentals have, the benefits that they can have. So are impacts positive or negative? And then to also, once we had a draft ordinance, bring it back to them and run through it line by line. Joined in this focus group was Mayor Melanie Piana and Councilperson Kat Bruner James. And we had guided discussions, and after we had the draft language, or after we had the meeting, we brought a summary to the short-term, or to the Ordinance Review Committee. And from there, the Ordinance Review Committee made their suggestions along with city management and the city attorney, Dan Christ. We were then presented with a draft ordinance. We brought that back to the focus group. We workshopped and recorded their comments, and then brought that back to the Ordinance Review Committee, or to the sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. We brought it back from the, we took the notes from the second STR focus group to the Ordinance Review Committee. Any additional changes that were requested or required were made, and that would be the ordinance draft language that you see in front of you tonight for consideration. I know we could, I'm not going to do the, take everybody's time up by going through the ordinance line by line, but it is available on tonight's agenda packet for anybody who's listening. But the goal of the ordinance is, right now, short-term rentals are not regulated in the city of Ferndale. So any residential structure right now could technically operate as a short-term rental, but without regulation. So what this ordinance is doing is allowing the city the ability to regulate short-term rentals to try and mitigate any adverse impacts that it could have on the welfare, the safety, the health, or just the overall quality of life of surrounding properties, adjacent properties to short-term rentals. So some of the goals with the ordinance is overnight occupancy limits. This one's based off of square footage and the tables within the Michigan Residential Code and the 2015, and the International Property Maintenance Code as adopted by the city of Ferndale. There is the ability to revoke the license of a short-term rental if it has had repeated 3 documented, verified ordinance violations with the revocation per review of the city manager. And then just examples of ordinance violations that say could escalate to that review with the city manager. That'd be noise, trash, exterior property maintenance, parking violations. Again, and these have to be substantiated. So just having a report put on See Click Fix isn't enough to get your license reviewed for revocation. They have to be substantiated. And then the other, I think probably the biggest part of this, complementary at least, is the required annual registration of short-term rentals. And with inspections being conducted by the Ferndale Building Department and the acting and fire marshal for the Ferndale Fire Department. And with that, again, I would just like to thank everybody from the focus group and the Ordinance Review Committee, and you, Ms. Mayor, and Councilperson Bruner James. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, for walking us through that. Before I open it up for council questions, I am gonna, after council asks some questions, I am gonna open it up for comment from the public tonight to give some feedback, and then we can go into the motion and deliberate. But before I do that, I wanted to give a little bit more backstory on how this short-term rental ordinance came to be. And it really started when I was on council, started getting complaints from residents who live next to or near a short-term rental. And there were not a lot of record of a trend of Airbnbs, rentals in the city. And we really didn't have a sort of a lay of the land in 2019 of where this was going. And so asked staff to move forward on this, and it got delayed this year because of the pandemic. So I'm really glad that this is finally here at the end, and that council has had deliberations on this. But there's another track here going on at the same time. It's a legislative track, and that the legislators have been trying to exempt cities from passing short-term rental ordinances and preempting them, taking away cities' power to even put in an ordinance so that the local government can control these short-term rentals in the best way that is needed for their community. And tourist cities like Traverse City and Saugatuck, they have a real problem of more homes going over to short-term rentals than available for people who actually live there and losing some of their affordable housing. So it's a real issue for cities, and while it's not a big issue in terms of a tourist town for Ferndale, it is an issue for our residents who may live next to a short-term rental. They didn't sign up to live next to a hotel when they bought their house, but the industry has changed, and these new tools and short-term rentals is now a fact of life. It's part of every community that is, doesn't have a hotel like Ferndale, and short-term rentals are filling in that gap. So there's a balance here that we're trying to do, and that solve these challenges and provide more guardrails for our code enforcement staff and police officers to respond to our residents who are calling in with complaints, and putting more guardrails in for short-term rental owners, homeowners who may not be monitoring their renters in an appropriate manner, and also making sure that we're following state law. And the preemptive state short-term rentals is coming back on the agenda again, I think in the next couple of months. So even though if we pass this tonight, there could still be a chance that the legislature passes legislation that takes away this ordinance ability to actually do anything. So there's a two-track here: pass it tonight, but still keep our state reps and senator informed that they need to support short-term rental law at the state level. So complicated thing, but I think it's an important backstory of understanding where we are in this process and what's going to happen tonight if this passes. So thanks, Emily, and thanks, Council, for giving me that moment, or taking that moment, and I will open it up for Council to ask questions of fact-finding, and then I will open it up to the public for comment. Councilwoman Mikulski?
So I'll start, and I wanted to preface this by just saying I was part of the Ordinance Commission. I have reviewed this extensively, but we had a resident bring up some interesting questions during public comment. And I've also had a couple discussions with Airbnb owners, and I feel like we need to revisit some of what's in this ordinance and get some clarity on it before we consider passing it. With that said, one of the items on page 4, let's see what section this is, section 7-157, item 9, the short-term rental unit owner collecting information. It's come to my attention that Airbnb may not be transmitting the mailing address. They may only be transmitting name, email address, and phone number. And it's my understanding that in a lot of these cases where somebody has an Airbnb, they may not be present when that individual shows up. There might be a lockbox, there might be some way that that person can get in without directly interacting with the property owner. And I'm wondering if it makes sense for us to mandate that we're collecting the mailing address when that may be something that's very difficult for them to get. Do we have a reason that we have all of that information within this proposal? Is there a reason that we would have that mailing address mandated within this ordinance?
Through the chair, why don't I facilitate questions, because there's a couple staff here. Is City Attorney Dan Christ available? I don't see him on my list for some reason.
He's in my window box. There he is.
Sorry, Dan.
Yeah, I'm happy to try and answer that, but I think the sentiment of that requirement was to address the circumstance where there was a complaint perhaps by the renter, and the city needed to get back in touch with that the renter, as opposed to the unit owner with respect to some issue or circumstance. It was essentially designed for contact. So whether email address or telephone number is sufficient versus the additional requirement of mailing address, it was really just trying to be comprehensive to make sure there was a method to contact that possible renter.
Thank you. Additionally, it was brought up earlier that would we be setting ourselves up for a situation where in areas around our downtown, let's say that there's a house that wants to add on to the house and have, 5 bedrooms and make each one of those an Airbnb rental bedroom. Is that going to be possible? Could somebody build a larger structure in our downtown and open it up to having multiple rooms become units for rent through Airbnb?
If I could, through the chair, I think that would be limited under the city's zoning ordinance as it relates to the size of the lot. There are lot dimensions, setback requirements that would come into play as it relates to the potential building envelope that a particular property might be able to construct on a lot. So if a particular property owner had additional space, they may be able to put an addition to their property consistent with the zoning ordinance like any other property owner in the city. So, I mean, I think that's that, but as far as trying to maximize it in some manner that is inconsistent with the zoning ordinance, they would not be able to do that.
One additional question, and this is a hypothetical. So if we have a structure like Ferndale House, is there anything that would prevent a Ferndale House from turning into multiple little Airbnbs and short-term rentals?
Well, I don't have the specific section. Through the chair, I would think that that's not permitted under the zoning ordinance. The definition of short-term rental, in reading that definition, expressly provides that it is not a bed and breakfast, hotel, motel, or public lodging home, or public lodging house, which is defined. To the extent that there was a concern that apartment buildings should also be included in that definition, I don't see any problem with making that amendment for clarity.
I think that would make sense, personally, and I hope that others can weigh in on that.
That's a good question. And then I just want to caution, when you say Airbnb, that's a service provider, and that there's over 40, 50 service providers, so just be cautious how you use their brand.
Sure.
So. Are there any other questions from council? If not, I will open it up to Councilwoman James. I saw you unmute.
Yeah, I did have a question that sort of connects to some questions that Councilwoman Mikulski was asking. Can either the city attorney or possibly Emily clarify for me the question of sort of maximum occupancy? Now, my understanding when we were developing this language, there is an intersection, as I understand it, between the IPM, which I've now forgotten what that stands for.
International Property Maintenance Code.
Thank you. That there is sort of an intersection between the IPM and the ordinance language, where the IPM does set some boundaries as to maximum occupancy, and that we put some language in here that would sort of further cap maximum occupancy. And can someone sort of elaborate on that so I can make sure that my understanding was correct?
Well, I can start through the chair. The definition of bedroom in the ordinance, which is in section 7-154, incorporates and uses the International Property Maintenance Code definition for bedroom. And that's where the minimum area of 70 square feet came from, and where there's an additional person, the additional 50 square foot minimum to that bedroom size comes from. But in the draft of the ordinance, there was then the additional contemplation, I believe, with the ordinance committee that that there's in some properties and homes, there might be a common area that wasn't necessarily a bedroom. And that's where there is included in the bedroom definition the additional in the regulation as it relates to occupancy, which is 7-157 subpart 2, that allows for one additional person per short-term rental unit, in addition to the number of persons that would be allowed, the maximum number of persons that would be allowed in a bedroom.
Through the chair, I would also just ask Emily, if you could just give an opportunity, you're the assistant building official, can you just introduce the idea of the IPM code to the public and city council, and how that kind of provides some structure to the ordinance? I think that's an important point to make.
Certainly. So the IPMC, the International Property Maintenance Code, correct me if I'm using the wrong language, Dan, but it's adopted in reference to city ordinance.
Well, that's fine, yes.
Okay.
The city adopts it by reference.
Okay, thank you. And we use the IPMC in all of our code enforcement efforts, our rental registrations. It provides an overview and a standardized guide that you would find common in North America, the United States and Canada. In it, you're going to have definitions for rubbish, trash, bedroom, habitable spaces. It'll provide occupancy restrictions, requirements, ventilation, glazing surfaces or windows, heat standards or minimums. Usually when we refer to anything in this book as a standard, code is always the minimum. You know, so if you've met the qualifications of code, you're meeting the bare minimum requirement for operation in any situation. And so that is how we use the IPMC as the starting block. So everybody is welcome to meet or exceed the standards within the code. And for reference, we do have them available for public reference. So it isn't something that we contain as siloed information. It is always available to any member of the public through city resources or property owners if they do have questions. Did that adequately answer your question, Joe?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair, if I may.
Sure. Please go ahead.
So, Mayor, as you know, I've had issues with STRs for many, many years. When I first came onto council, I wanted to issue similar requirements, but at the time I was a lone person on council that was interested in pursuing that. And after my experience with drones, I decided I wasn't going to, I was just going to wait until there was more support. So I want to thank you, Mayor, and Councilwoman James for bringing this forward. So most corporate short-term facilities like B&Bs, hotels, motels are required to visibly post an inspection certificate. I'd really like to see this be added. I think this is a way that anyone who rents an STR in Ferndale knows to look for that certificate and know that they're in an approved facility. Because as you mentioned, a lot of people just go into a lockbox. They go in the house and, you know, that's it. They don't know if it's ever been inspected. They don't know if it's a certified facility or when the inspection was done. And I further support the idea of restricting the number of overnight occupants as other STR, you know, requires. So here's my concern is, all of our bedrooms in Ferndale, well, most of bedrooms in Ferndale are small. You know, I imagine a lot of these facilities have either a twin bed or at best a double bed, a full-size bed. And you really can't fit 4 people in that bedroom. If it's a 2-bedroom home with a twin bed and a double bed, you can't say that the occupancy is, overnight occupancy is 8 people. So I really think we need to restrict it to the facilities that are available. If there are 2 full or queen size beds, then you say that there's, you know, overnight for 4 plus 1 on a couch if you want to say an additional person. That doesn't restrict those people from having a barbecue in the backyard and having 20 people over for the day. It just restricts how many people overnight should be sleeping in these facilities. I know some people are probably really upset to hear this, but I'm sorry, if these property owners want to change their property from a residential home to a business, then they need to be treated like a business. And that's what I have to say about that.
Okay, so I'm going to open it up to, I know council probably has more questions, but I'm going to open it up to our hand raisers and public comment because we're moving into opining a little bit. And so we need to hear from our residents. And Kyle, can you take us through that, please?
Yes, Mayor. So first up, Kelly Chow.
Hi, Kelly.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. So I have a couple quick observations just to make, and I would like to make the public aware of kind of what we've talked about during all of our STR meetings. One, part of my concern as well about the mailing address is the fact that Airbnbs, at least to my research and knowledge, and a lot of other short-term rental companies don't conduct thorough enough background checks. And the other thing, at least from my research and on my end, companies allow their hosts to be very selective about reviews that are actually kept and posted for a house. So for instance, if I went and stayed at house ABC and put a 1-star review, from my understanding about how reviews work is the host, if they didn't like that, they didn't have to post it. So their rating could potentially still be 5 stars and they're not showing the full picture. So my concern about not having mailing addresses or a driver's license number for the renters is the fact that A, if the police ticket, and because we discussed, you know, first opportunity versus, you know, the renters actually need to pay the car ticket, etc. How do we get a hold of them? How do we contact them? And then just again, kind of along those lines, we've had our first shootings at short-term rentals within the past month or so. How do we handle moving forward shootings on a neighbor's property? Because I know, at least in my world, I've had the Airbnb renters park on my property illegally, and you know, unfortunately, there's not much I can do about it if it comes down to a gunfight. So I think that's about it. All I wanted to say. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thanks, Kelly. Kyle?
Thank you, Kelly. Next we have Dave. Welcome back.
Hello.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, all. Okay, so if you actually read the wording for what a bedroom is, it is an area in a dwelling that is either, key word there, either A, a room designed or used for sleeping, or B, and then it goes into that whole thing of square footage and so on and so forth. But the actual wording is an area in a dwelling that is either A, either. So any designed bedroom counts as a bedroom, and under the ordinance that we have now, counts for 4 people. Your typical 3-bedroom home under the ordinance that I'm looking at right now will allow 13 people to reside there. That's okay. Mr. Christ, the zoning around downtown Ferndale is R3. As I stated earlier, maybe you weren't here, but you should know this. As city attorney, you should know this, that the zoning, the lot next to me, the house could be torn down and a 45-foot tall, 5-bedroom or 5-unit apartment building could be built. And there's nothing in any of this that would restrict or stop anybody from getting 5 Airbnb units and turning that into a small hotel with as many, well, how many bedrooms are there going to be at 4 per bedroom? I mean, then also if you actually look at this, the thing, the B section here, you can turn your dining room into a bedroom. You can turn your kitchen, you can turn the basement into the kitchen. You could literally under this, you could maybe 50, 60 people depending, right? But Mr. Christ, you need to know, someone can build 5-unit apartment building. The zoning restrictions is not going to stop this. This is a fact, right? So when you tell me that the zoning restrictions will stop it, that's not true. 5-unit apartment right now on Vester Street. There's an 8-unit apartment building being built on an 80 foot of frontage. Someone could take and get Airbnb things, and the owner could decide to turn it under this ordinance, could decide to turn it into a little 8-room hotel. And what? There's nothing to stop him. 8 times, well, 12 bedrooms times 4, 48 people plus more. You need to go back and figure out what's going on with this. Sorry. And also,
Could I, through the chair, could I briefly respond just to?
Hang on a second. I just want to make sure he has his full time.
Sure.
Randy, do you have more things to say? Randy?
oh, I'm sorry. No, I don't really have anything else.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure you had your full time, and I knew.
This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. It's not written correctly. It needs to go back. And my idea that you can start a 5-room hotel, or you can start a little mini hotel under this without there being some restriction on how many units, how many people can stay on a lot, so on and so forth. That's exactly what will happen. Of course, you can't retroactively change the law. You'll get lawsuits because they've invested money, blah, blah, blah. You need to nip this in the bud right now. It doesn't work.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sorry I called you Randy earlier. And I want you to know everybody here has good intentions and is trying to make this the best possible ordinance. And this is our first time around. So please keep your comments directed about the ordinance and the issues and not towards people. Thank you.
And Mayor, next we do have Randy. And Randy, it's asking me to promote you to panelist so that you can speak. So I'll do that, but we just ask that you leave your video off while you're speaking.
Hi, Randy. Oops. Did he? I don't see him anymore.
There may be an issue connecting the audio. I'm not seeing a microphone, but we'll leave you as panelists and go to the next. And then if you can get that fixed, we'll come back to you. Next, we have Mike Flores.
Good evening, Council.
Hi, Mike.
Again, Augusto Mike Flores on Whittington Street. Just for full disclosure, I am an avid user of Airbnb, and I am also an investor in several Airbnb properties, not here in the city of Ferndale, but throughout Michigan and the state of Texas. So one of the questions that I had is in regards to kind of best practices and have we benchmarked other cities. So I know that obviously Ferndale is not the only city that is experiencing this problem. I don't know if Emily or some of the other team members, some of the commission members that worked on this benchmarked other cities like San Francisco, Chicago, New York, who are experiencing similar problems. Obviously, those are big cities, but maybe some of the smaller cities around Chicago, like Schurenburg and Oak Park and Franklin and so forth, that are very desirable areas. One thing that as an avid user and also as an investor that I know of is that as we continue to construct all these beautiful towers in our cities, they become much more attractive locations for businesses and for entrepreneurs like Airbnbs. So I know that we make more money by renting out our properties as Airbnbs versus actually renting them on year-long leases. So as our beautiful little town becomes more attractive, especially in the summertime around our beautiful festivals, you actually make more money in 3 months or 4 months than you would a whole year of leasing out to a steady resident. I can share that I know that obviously around graduations, I know that our Ferndale properties skyrocket from $100 all the way up to $500 a night, depending around that April, May, June timeframe to support the graduations happening at U of D, Wayne State, and even as far away as U of M. So just to kind of put some additional context in terms of what does it mean to actually have an Airbnb, and as our city becomes much more attractive and we construct beautiful towers that become much more attractive to entrepreneurs like myself in terms of purchasing property and turning it. So just a little bit of caution there. But just again, full disclosure, I don't have an Airbnb here in the city of Ferndale, but we do have properties outside, and I can speak a little bit of experience from that perspective. So is there a way to limit how many Airbnbs go into a tower? I know some other communities have put, especially towers that have support from city incentives, are able to do that. And if we can speak a little bit more about benchmarks that the commission used, the people who worked on this around some other communities around the state of Michigan or the nation. Thank you, Council.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Next up, Jason McCaffrey.
Hi, Jason.
Hello. Thanks for including me on this. I have some prepared notes, but I just want to address that the last comments that were made. I don't really understand how Airbnb is a benefit to the city just because it's making more money. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but it just seems like the tax revenue is the tax revenue. So I don't really understand the argument that the last person was making. But here's my prepared statement. I'm a resident at 253 Flowerdale. I want to express my gratitude to Emily Loomis, Mayor Piana, and the whole City Council for involving me in the drafting of this ordinance. I wish I could say that I'm cautiously optimistic that this will help, but it's honestly truer for me to say that I'm cautiously pessimistic. This ordinance might help, but I have my doubts. The ordinance states that one of the main purposes is to mitigate possible adverse impacts to the quality of life of surrounding properties. I think this ordinance is a step in the right direction, especially as compared to the lack of regulation that previously ruled the day, but I fear it isn't a silver bullet. In mine and my wife's experience, the Airbnb host next door wants it both ways. She wants the benefits of operating a lucrative business and the benefits of neighborly courtesy that goes along with being in a neighborhood. Contrast that with us long-term residents feeling like our couch is 5 feet from a hotel loading zone without any neighborly courtesies coming from that Airbnb that we've come to know and appreciate from our real neighbors. The Airbnb host expects us to call her when there are problems, essentially making us her property managers. Through this ordinance process, I've met other hosts and have learned that they have technology and processes in place that don't place this burden on the neighbors. It's noteworthy that as we discuss this, of the 4 houses immediately to my right and my left, the Airbnb is the only property that hasn't even bothered to shovel their walk since yesterday's snow. This is true every time it snows. So as I said, the ordinance is a step in the right direction, but I still have concerns with the language. My main concerns are what a lot of people have mentioned, which is the occupancy rules, saying 4 people per bedroom plus 1, well, with rules around square footage. I'm still unclear on how many people are able to occupy the Airbnb next door to me. Emily tried to clear this up for me in an email. I heard Dan Christ's explanation in the meeting, but I'm still not sure how to figure out exactly how to do this math on my own for the house next door to me. I'm also concerned that enforcement requires us to continue to have to police the property. For example, who's going to regularly confirm there's a proper trash receptacle? There's frequently just a garbage bag thrown in the backyard open to the rats. Who's going to regularly verify RVs and campers aren't in the driveway? How will we know if the host is actually providing the city's noise ordinance in writing? It feels like all of this is on us, and if this is on us, the people whose peace is disrupted on a regular basis to monitor, we're not going to be granting any leniency or grace. I don't want to be the Grinch of this neighborhood, but I love my house and have loved, past tense, living in Ferndale, and need to know that I did everything in my power to fix my situation, and hopefully it can be fixed before making any dramatic life decisions like moving to another city. I'm still unclear on how we ensure our complaints get substantiated. I know I heard Emily say earlier, see-click fix isn't enough, so I'm just not sure how that substantiation is happening. And it should be noted that we managed to live in Ferndale for about a decade without being this type of Grinch neighbor. We're actually good neighbors who love our neighborhood and our neighbors. This is a new development for us after being forced next to a commercial property in what we thought was a residential neighborhood. So I just, in closing, sincerely appreciate the city involving me in this process. I'm trying to maintain hope that this ordinance will help, but should we still be continuing to deal with the same levels of disruption a year after this ordinance is adopted, it will be clear to us that it's more appealing to turn our home into an Airbnb than to continue being a resident. In future iterations of this ordinance, I'd ask that we consider if we'd rather incentivize future Airbnb owners moving to our community or future Ferndale residents. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jason.
We have Alan.
Hi, thank you. And thanks, Emily, for the presentation tonight. I had questions around, I think, kind of related to what we're seeing right now as we talk about public health and with coronavirus on, I know, my mind. My family members in Grand Rapids were actually in this situation where her apartment building was a fairly new apartment building when she moved in pre-COVID, but it was still relatively unoccupied. And so kind of before COVID and during COVID, the leasing management company turned it all into short-term rentals. So it effectively turned her apartment building into a college dorm. And she was forced into a situation where she had to move out. So when I think people were making comparisons to like what would happen in the case of Ferndale House or something turning into all rentals, I think that example really came to mind, and it's something that I think there could be better language on, especially the public health angle. One thing I'd also like to see is at what point is a short-term rental no longer a short-term rental? What's the line between a short-term rental and a bed and breakfast? And at what point do short-term rentals have to fulfill the same roles that businesses do? And this is, I'll always talk about accessibility, but short-term rentals, Airbnbs are not made for everybody. And I think equity is another big thing. And as we talk about what our inclusive housing plan is in Ferndale, how do short-term rentals fit into that? And I think the short answer is they usually don't. So there's nothing that says an Airbnb or a short-term rental has to be accessible. And they kind of fall in this gray space where they can act as a profit machine in a business, but without any of the rules that businesses have to follow. So I'd like to see maybe something about that. I'm okay with short-term rentals operating, but I think there has to be a line where it really is no longer a short-term rental. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, Alan. And then Mayor, it looks like Dave is indicating he would like to speak again. And that's.
You know what? I think we need to move on. I feel like between his email and his comments, we have heard Dave's comments and want to get to the staff responding to some of these questions. So why don't we have our city manager talk about the concerns I think that everybody's has had from the steering committee, from the residents tonight, and from council working on this ordinance is oversight and enforcement. And how are we going to hold these homeowners and short-term rental landlords accountable? Joe?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So there is an important provision that we haven't really focused our energy on, and that is the enforcement provision within the ordinance. So this ordinance parallels a robust rental program that we have significant experience running. 20% of our housing stock in Ferndale is composed of a rental population. So Emily's department has robust experience in actually enforcing and applying rental code and rental inspection program, which this should it be passed, the short-term rental ordinance would be nested under within the rental context. So in terms of enforceability, there is a provision for, there's definitions in terms of tests for a violation of the short-term rental. And there could be no more than 3 within a year, or otherwise it would be subject to a revocation of your license, and you could not operate and or advertise as a short-term rental in Ferndale, subject to the city manager's revocation order. And secondly, how we would actually proactively manage that. Emily has a follow-up intention of coming to council to request a development tool that is actually part of one of our partner software programs called Granicus. So Granicus actually provides a short-term rental enforcement software tool. It's a companion tool to their other suites of software. And so it would not just be see-click-fix. The actual software scans properties. It's coded to scan properties and use artificial intelligence to do so, to help produce a report of properties that would be defined per the ordinance as STRs. And then they would actually also provide an enforcement mechanism as well. And I'll let Emily speak to that. She's the subject matter expert on that. But there's an important enforcement component that I don't think we've covered. And then part 2, I think once we discuss that, I'd suggest we go back to Dan Chris to talk a little bit about how this ordinance interacts with other ordinances, such as public lodging ordinances, which do regulate Airbnbs within the city. And I think we should also talk a little bit more about how the Zoning and Enabling Act and the zoning ordinance actually provides a nice check and balance to all of these hypothetical situations about housing uses and adapting housing uses. Emily, why don't you talk a little bit about enforcement, the rental program, and then the solution that could be presented by Granicus.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, currently we have a static, I mean, it fluctuates, but a number of 2,364-ish 1 and 2 family rentals in the city. So the staff has both policy, so standard operating procedure, but also the institutional knowledge on how to conduct a program for both intake, moderation, regulation, punishment, and just turnover for rental properties. We have explored tech solutions, and as Joe had mentioned, we did find that Granicus has brought a software into their suite of tech solutions that will search using AI, followed by human moderation to intake, monitor STR stock within the city of Ferndale using geofencing technology, very similar to a lot of other programs we use, and then provide a 24-hour customer service solution with a high accountability protocol of turnaround within an hour, police notification systems, document retention, and even as far as mailing and filing of violations, also with complete integration to our existing software suite that we use for building information, BSNA.
Thank you, Emily. And the funding idea would be that a licensing fee could possibly cover the cost of the program, which would be the software enforcement mechanism. So, right, the cost of the program should be subsidized by the STR owner's virtual licensing fee, similar to how you would have a rental program, and the associated licensing fees take care of all the costs associated with inspections and regulation. Nan, can you speak a little bit more on zoning and how it interacts with this ordinance to prevent some of the hypotheticals that we've discussed, some of the checks and balances?
Well, I already talked about the zoning issue regarding a footprint of an addition that somebody might wish to construct on their home. To, I guess the concern is somebody wants to maximize additional bedrooms. And so the number would be limited by that zoning footprint that's permitted in the particular zone district. And let me just, certainly I've heard a number of comments from the residents who seem concerned with respect to the issue of the establishment of the occupancy number based on bedroom, and whether the bedrooms within most Ferndale houses should have a number of 4. And that number was looked at. One of the inquiries was what other ordinances were looked at. A number of short-term rental ordinances throughout the state of Michigan were looked at and reviewed in connection with the drafting of this proposed ordinance. Large urban locations and cities around the country were not really consulted in particular. So the focus on the other ordinances was state of Michigan municipalities that have considered and adopted this type of ordinance. And so that's where that 4 per bedroom came. I think that issue is one for council to consider, because the number of 4 per bedroom is not a magic number. It was viewed as what might happen by a utilizer of a short-time rental. You know, if there was bunk beds, a pair of bunk beds, is that part of the load that should be permitted? And maybe it shouldn't, or maybe that's not exactly the right number. But an important part that council needs to keep in mind is that when an applicant who wishes to have a short-term rental unit completes their application, it doesn't just get approved as is necessarily. It is reviewed by the city and inspected. And so a person who asserts that every room of the house is a sleeping area, I would expect that Emily would find that as an unreasonable position and would not approve that type of application. And in that case, the applicant would have an appeal right, and the appeal right would be to go to the city manager's office for a determination as to whether that rejection of that type of application was appropriate or not. So there is that check within the framework of the application process that should help make sure that the calculations on bedrooms is an accurate number for establishing the potential load to the particular short-term rental unit. But again, the number of 4, there is not there's no magic associated with that number, and just to the extent council thinks that perhaps should move in one way or the other, that would certainly be still a reasoned position. One final point that I just wanted to add, I'm sorry for going on so long. The effective date of this proposed ordinance is, should council decide that it wishes to adopt the ordinance, it's still not going to be effective for another 90 days. And that's provided in the ordinance, that there is a delayed effective date for this ordinance. And then the second part that council has to decide is what the appropriate
Okay, so
Through the chair.
Greg?
So again, I point out the idea of a certificate that's posted when we have a fire marshal do an inspection of a restaurant or a retail business. They limit how many people are allowed in that facility. If you only have seating for 120 people, you're not going to say that you could have 450 people in that space. You can only allow so many people in that space. A hotel wouldn't say that they have, overnight occupancy for 2,000 people if they only have, 200 rooms. I think the idea really needs to be that this inspection identifies how many sleeping areas or beds can be allowed. A twin bed can't sleep 3 people. A king size bed might be able to sleep 3 people, but you wouldn't say there's a twin bed so 3 people can sleep in this room. I think that has to be part of the inspection process, to say how many people are going to be allowed to sleep at this STR, and that information be posted so that again, and I go back to this thing about being posted, because if there's anything that is wrong with this facility, the renter has the ability to look at that certificate, get a phone number, and be able to contact the city to say, this isn't right. I was rented this house expecting, room for 12 people, and there's only 2 beds.
So I'm going to stop here and have an inflection point with council. And based off of comments tonight and from staff, as well as residents, that we need to table this and send this back to the ordinance committee to make some tweaks. Based off of what we've heard, particularly around, I think the preemptive concern, which hasn't happened yet, but I'm hearing from residents that it could, is that apartment buildings could shift over to primarily short-term rentals, and that would be a unhealthy precedent set for the city, because we would be pushing out people from actually living here permanently and altering level of rents. And that is not something that we want to encourage. And I think there's other tweaks that need to happen to this ordinance. And going back to, I think, MML for some best practice language to verify what we've heard around bedrooms and other things. The way that I feel about ordinances is that you get it right as best as you can, and then you pass it, and then you practice it. And since this is the first one ever in Ferndale, and we're trying to get our arms around short-term rentals, this is a process that I've learned that every city has gone through. We are no different from us trying to get our arms around this issue and provide the right guardrails for residents like Jason, who doesn't have to be the person always calling on the property and, disrupt his quality of life. When it's the renters and homeowners causing problems in the neighborhood. So I propose tabling this. Sorry, Ordinance Committee, we're kicking it back to you. That's my recommendation. But I will support and follow up with appropriate partners as well to support you. Is that
We have
something?
to vote on that, Mayor?
Do we need to vote on tabling?
Well, through the chair, if there's no, I don't believe there's been a motion made.
Nope.
There
So,
isn't.
so the item, if there's no motion made, will die for lack of support. Or you could pick, if you wish it to come back, you could table it to a date certain. Either of those, but I suspect that if you just take no action, it'll come back after it's been refined.
Yeah. Well, I would like to say that this should come back for the next council meeting, but that's putting a lot of pressure on the ordinance committee. Since there is a 90-day start date, and the 90 days for those who are listening is to give property owners who are short-term rental landlords enough notice to comply with the new regulations and do that in a fair, honest, transparent manner. So if we delay this, that 90-day bumps out again, and so the relief for our residents are still not secured in place. But I think what I've heard, we need to take this time to make the tweaks. What are some comments from council on this recommendation?
I would completely agree. I think we need to table it and revisit it.
I agree as well, Mayor. And I want to take a chance to thank my fellow council members and yourself, Mayor, for really taking the time and investing in making this right and not just pushing something through. So.
Yep. All right, so we are tabling this item to go back to the ordinance committee to answer the questions we've heard tonight and the recommendations at adding some more guardrails in for items that weren't put in the draft already. Okay, so that is the direction for staff. Thank you, Emily, to continuing to shepherd this through. We really appreciate it, and thank you, Dan, for all your legal guidance getting us to this point in time. All right, folks, that is the conclusion of our consent agenda. Thanks for hanging until 10:30. It's been or 10:45. It's been a long night, and now we're going to move on to call the council, and we're going to start with our city manager for director department updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We will try to keep it brief. First, we will have an announcement from our Parks and Recreation Director, or Parks and Recreation employee, Emmanuel Johnson.
Not director yet, quite yet. But just a few quick updates from Parks and Rec tonight. First of all, we want to announce that we're going to be opening up a virtual Valentine's Day cooking class, which will take place on Saturday, February 13th at 6 p.m. The class will be hosted by Chef Jeff Tatum, and it'll be geared toward couples, but it's also appropriate for children and families looking to get in on the culinary action. Chef Tatum will lead participants in cooking their own Valentine's Day dinner while teaching proper cooking techniques. Included in this will also be mocktail recipes and kits, which will be made available as add-on items for the class. These kits will include glasses and garnishments, and the cost for the class will be $20. The mocktail kits, as an additional fee, will be another $7. Dinner and mocktail ingredients are not provided through this course. Participants are responsible for gathering their own ingredients once the menu is released. Other than that, we also want to announce that adult softball classes are now open. Adult softball leagues are now open for registration. We anticipate that games will begin play in mid to late April. So you'll want to keep an eye out on our Facebook page and our city website for any updates on that. And also, I'm sorry, I lost my note. Here we go. We are also seeking any volunteer coaches for our youth soccer league. Youth soccer is annually our largest league that we have, and this is the first leagues that we're going to be trying to put on during the pandemic era, or at least what the stage of the pandemic that we're in right now. So we are seeking volunteers to help lead some of these teams and coach them through the season. Anybody that's interested should contact Lisa Bryant. You can email her at lbryant@ferndalemI.gov. That's all for us.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Next, we have Jordan Torty, the CED Director, to talk about Ferndale, an upcoming Ferndale Moves public meeting this week.
Thank you, Joe. Yep, everybody, really quickly, I just want to remind folks, we have our Woodward Moves project meeting on Wednesday, the 27th at 6:30 p.m. If you go to ferndalemoves.com, you can get all the information, but this is an opportunity to provide comments on the opportunity to redesign Woodward in alignment with MDOT's planned resurfacing next year.
Thank you, Jordan, and no further comments from staff. Mayor, ball's in your court.
Thank you. I'm going to start tonight for the call to council with Councilman Polika.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually have nothing this evening.
Okay, moving on to Councilwoman Mikulski.
I also have nothing this evening.
All right, going through. Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May.
I just want to further congratulate and welcome Chief Robinson. And that's all I have tonight.
And Councilwoman James.
Well, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for having something to say, so I wasn't the one to break the streak. I just wanted to chime in really quickly and thank and acknowledge everyone who hung on to talk about the STR ordinance through a very long meeting, only to be bitterly disappointed that you're going to have to come back at some point in the future, although maybe there's some relief or excitement that there may be some changes made. But I do want to comment that I think through further discussion, some of the sort of what if scenarios that came up tonight, I think those fears could be mitigated through further discussion in comparison to some other ordinances that regulate things like public lodging houses and things that it may look blurry if you haven't looked at all these different ordinances and how they intersect. But in particular, I do think that the occupancy clarification is a note well taken that deserves some attention and some refinement. But I'm glad that we didn't do it on the fly here at this meeting because I'm really tired and recovering from oral surgery. So I turned my camera off a lot more than usual tonight because my eyes are watering and my face is puffy. So thanks for giving me the leeway to do that.
I hope your face becomes less puffy soon.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say tonight that I've started my next appointed term of the National League of Cities Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. And oh boy, am I really excited this year to talk about infrastructure at the national level because something actually might change in terms of legislation. And so, but I wanted to let people know that the committee that I'm on is actually focusing on train horns and train crossings. And seeing if there can get movement made on communities working with railroads who block major streets for a very long time. So we're in the same boat with a lot of other cities. So stay tuned, and I'll give updates to see where that goes. With that, thanks everybody for hanging tonight. It was a long one, second meeting of the year, but really good stuff. Great things happening in the community. And we take seriously our residents' concerns and try to solve them. So see you next time and have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.